Chapter 1001. Gu Ziyan shuddered and quickly averted his gaze. He was so nervous that his heart almost jumped out of his chest. Shun Juli retracted his gaze and pressed his palm on Ning Xiuma's shoulder. Ning Xiuma was staring at the sea, waiting for Yi Feng to emerge. She had already deduced that Yi Feng had won the battle at the bottom of the sea based on the roar of the big white bear. Now, she was just waiting for Yi Feng to return triumphantly. Shun Juli's touch hurt her a little. She raised her hand and patted him. Stop fooling around. Her eyes were still staring at the sea. This girl was actually so nervous about another man. Shun Juli was a little unhappy. He put more force on his palm and said coldly in her ear, "Xiuema, if your good friend can never break the curse, will you be very sad?" Ning Xiuma immediately turned around. Of course. She looked at him suspiciously. What do you mean? Did something happen to Ziyuan again? Didn't you say that the curse will be broken soon? Her series of questions naturally represented her attitude. Shun Juli said lightly, "If there are no accidents, the curse will be broken." Then why did you ask that just now? Ning Xiuma was unusually sharp. I want to kill someone. Shun Juli glanced at Gu Ziyan again. This was the first time he had scruples about killing someone. Ning Xiuma thought for a while and suddenly understood. She asked him softly, "If I kill him, will Yin Ziyuan's curse never be broken?" This girl was smart enough. Shun Juli nodded to show that she was right. He added, "Not only can it not be broken, but if the caster of the curse encounters an accident, the person who is cursed will also die." Pervert. Ning Xiuma cursed softly. Before Yin Ziyuan's curse was broken, he had to keep Gu Ziyan alive. Guru, who do you think is the pervert behind this? Shun Juli paused for a moment before he finally spat out 3 words, Shui Elan. Ning Xiuma raised her eyebrows in surprise. It's him? Why would he do that? He glanced at the surface of the sea again to see if Yi Feng had returned. Shun Juli pulled her to sit down. There's no need to look. Yi Feng is fine. He's just a little injured. He then explained. Gu Ziyan is the reincarnation of a zither boy. He has a strand of zither soul in his body, which can purify and repair all zither strings in this world. Shui Elan must be in urgent need of this strand of zither soul, which is why he helped him. He used the twin life curse to exchange for Gu Ziyan's zither soul. Ning Xiuma was a little suspicious. I think with Shui Elan's personality, he doesn't seem like someone who likes to exchange with others. Instead, he just directly snatches it. Shun Juli looked at her with a faint smile on his face. You seem to know him well. Yes, if this zither soul could be used to snatch, Shui Elan naturally wouldn't waste this effort. However, there is something strange about this zither soul. It must be Gu Ziyan who voluntarily forced the zither soul out of his body. Only then can it be complete and have the function of repairing zither strings. So that's how it is. So it's that bastard's doing again. Ning Xiuma couldn't help but rub her eyebrows. This Shui Elan was really like a ghost that wouldn't go away. He always appeared around her from time to time. If he wasn't here to harm her, he would harm her friends, splash. With a sound, Yi Feng finally emerged from the sea. He was dragging a large bearskin behind him. It turned out that he didn't emerge from the sea for a long time because he went down to peel the bearskin. His face was a little pale. When he came to the island, he paused for a moment under the water. He closed his eyes slightly, then jumped up and flew up with the bearskin. Chapter 1002. When he landed, he staggered a little, but he quickly steadied himself. His eyes swept over Yinzing, paused for a moment, and then looked away. Yi Feng, how are you? Ning Xiuma had already keenly noticed that Yi Feng was injured, but he was originally dressed in black, and his whole body was dripping wet, so she really couldn't see where the bloodstains were. Sorry for making you worry. Yi Feng is fine. If you know that others will be worried, then don't try to show off. Yin Ziyuan suddenly interrupted in a sharp voice. Her voice was as cold as the surrounding seawater. Why did you go hunting a bear for no reason? Yin Ziyan didn't know why, but when she saw Yi Feng like this, she inexplicably became angry. Can you not make decisions on your own in the future? The more she spoke, the angrier she became. You caused everyone to worry. You wasted everyone's time. We still have to hurry on our way later." Her words made Yifeng's face turn even paler. "Ziyuan, don't be angry." Gu Ziyan stepped forward to smooth things over. His eyes lightly glanced at the bearskin. "Brother Yi, you're so skilled. You actually managed to kill this ice field's little conqueror." "I was lucky." Yifeng only answered him with 2 words, and then threw a large piece of bear meat at him. "Child Gu, roast this meat. Eating it can help to resist the cold." Gu Ziyan looked at the large piece of bloody bear meat and frowned in disgust. "The bear meat is very rough. I'm afraid you won't be able to bite through it." "No, this kind of bear meat is quite tender, and it has a hot nature. It can be used to replenish the body's heat." Yifeng had already begun to clean the bearskin on the ice. He used the ice blade to scrape it while explaining to Gu Ziyan. Yifeng had already seen that Yin Ziyuan didn't eat much, and in this place where a drop of water turned into ice, if she didn't have good food to replenish her energy, her body wouldn't last more than a few days. And she was definitely hungry. Gu Ziyan still didn't feel at ease. "Hot nature? I'm afraid that it will affect my body." Yifeng finally stared at him. "You can roast it for everyone to eat." Roasting meat was the most effortless. Gu Ziyan should be able to do it. Gu Ziyan choked. He looked at the bear meat on the ice and said, "That's not a problem, but there's ice here, there's no firewood to roast meat." Just as he finished speaking, dozens of firewood suddenly appeared on the ground. He raised his head in astonishment and saw Ning Xiuma leisurely retract her hand. "Don't worry about firewood. With me here, you can get as much as you want." Yifeng Ziyan, Yifeng you, Yifeng why this time? Gu Ziyan couldn't find any other reason. He lowered his eyes and looked at his hands. This was a pair of hands that could play beautiful notes. These hands had not done much rough work. Ever since he relied on his zither skills to make a living, he had taken good care of these hands. Was he going to use these hands to do the rough work of cutting and roasting meat today? That gentleman stayed away from a kitchen. It was a bit degrading for him to do this. And the bear meat was bloody and looked a bit salty, and the weather was so cold. He stood in place, a little hesitant. Looking at Yin Ziyuan, he hoped that she could say a few words for him, or take the initiative to take over the rough work and be considerate of him, so that an elegant gentleman like him would have a good way out. After all, Yin Ziyuan was born as a young lady. She had lived a luxurious life since she was young, and there were many servants around her. Naturally, she wouldn't do such rough work. Chapter 1003. Of course, Yin Ziyuan did not want to take the initiative to take on this task. Not only did she not take on this task, but she also looked at him with sparkling eyes. "Ziyan, you know how to roast meat, right? I can't wait to taste Ziyan's cooking." Gu Ziyan, he could not find a way out, so he could only force a smile and cook the bear meat. After all, he had been poor before. He had done this kind of work a long time ago, so he was not too clumsy when he did it. But because the weather was too cold, the bear meat only stayed on the ice for a short period of time before it turned into a piece of hard frozen meat. It was quite difficult to cut it. Gu Ziyan pressed the meat with one hand and cut it with the sword with the other. He felt pain in both hands. One was painful from the cold, and the other was painful from exhaustion. He raised his head and looked at Yin Ziyuan. He wanted to say something, but he held back. Yin Ziyuan was now focused on him, so she immediately said, "Ziyan, do you have something to say to me?" Gu Ziyan paused and shook his head. No. Forget it. He would educate her about women's ethics when he went back. For example, he should have a woman to serve him, wash her hands for her husband, and make soup for her in-laws. He should not say it now, so as not to make her feel disgusted. There were so many eyes looking at him now. "Ziyuan, have a good rest first. I will roast the bear meat for you later to replenish your energy." "Okay." Yin Ziyuan seemed to be a little touched. She squatted beside him to keep him company, and, at the same time, she was also a little warmer by the campfire. "Yifeng, you are still bleeding." Ning Xiuma, who was not far away, said coldly, "You don't even care about your life to hunt this bear? It's okay, I know what I'm doing. It's just a flesh wound." Yifeng said calmly. His chest and abdomen were injured. He had already healed himself at the bottom of the sea and stopped the bleeding, but when he jumped up just now, he pulled at the wound and it opened up again. Ning Shuima glanced at Yan Ziyuan and saw that she was looking at them. She looked at Yifeng for a while, then looked away. Gu Ziyan's fingers also paused, and he turned to Yifeng and smiled apologetically. Brother Yi, you have suffered because of us. Thank you. Yifeng did not look up. He only said a few words. It's okay. Gu Ziyan took out a tube of medicine and asked Yan Ziyuan to give it to Yifeng. Brother Ye's injuries are not light. This medicine is the best medicine in Daliang City and is worth thousands of gold pieces. Brother Yi can use it to heal his injuries. Use it. Ning Shuima flicked her finger, and a bottle of medicine with a red glow appeared in Yifeng's hand. Yifeng held the bottle of medicine and froze. Everyone's eyes were focused on the bottle of medicine. It was the most precious medicine in the Sun-Moon sect, and it was rumored that the ancestor had personally made it. It had an immediate effect on injuries and was listed as the best medicine in the world. The ancestor was lazy, and he made medicine out of a whim. He might not make a bottle even after many years. Even his direct disciples might not be able to use it even once. One could imagine how precious this medicine was. Not to mention thousands of gold pieces, even tens of millions of gold pieces might not be able to buy it. And now, Ning Shuima had casually given such a bottle of medicine to Yifeng. Gu Ziyan's golden sword medicine was nothing compared to her medicine. Gu Ziyan's bottle of medicine froze before it could reach Yan Ziyuan's hand. He did not know whether to continue or take it back. Shenjuli glanced at Ning Shuima lightly. Chapter 1004. This girl actually gave away the thing that he had just given her not long ago. That red glowing medicine really did have a golden glowing effect. Not long after Yifeng used it, all the wounds on his body quickly healed, and the pain was no longer as unbearable. He immediately began to process the bear skin. After cleaning it, he cut out 3 pieces. Sharkmen were good at weaving. They could use starlight and moonlight as threads to weave beautiful shark's yarn. Yifeng also had this skill. He used Sharkman's origin energy to turn the starlight into threads and sewed the 3 pieces of bear skin together. An hour later, he had finished making the 3 bear skin coats. The big white bear seemed to have become a spirit. It loved cleanliness, so its fur was not as dirty as ordinary bear skins. Its silver white fur shone like satin under the starlight. The 3 bear skin coats looked warm and thick. They looked very good. He gave the 3 bear skin coats to Ning Shuima, Yan Ziyuan, and Gu Ziyan. Gu Ziyan was feeling uncomfortable from the cold, so he naturally did not refuse. He quickly put them on. Yan Ziyuan held the bear skin coat and was stunned for a moment. Then she slowly put it on. The coat was very fitting. The thick bear skin did not seem too bulky on her body. This bear skin was indeed very warm. Not long after she put it on, she could feel waves of warmth coming from it. His hands and feet, which were originally cold, gradually warmed up. She did not know what to feel. It was warm and painful at the same time. Something seemed to be rising from the depths of her heart. All right, the bear meat is done. Everyone come and eat. Gu Ziyan spoke and broke Yan Ziyuan's trance. He put a piece of roasted bear meat in her hand. Come, try a piece first. See how your husband's cooking is. As soon as he spoke, the strange warm and sour feeling that had just risen in Yan Ziyuan's heart was chased away. Yan Ziyuan took a bite of the bear meat and praised. It's very delicious. Ziyan, I didn't expect you to be so good at cooking. Gu Ziyan was a little proud. He glanced at Yifeng beside him, then raised his hand to ruffle Yan Ziyuan's hair. He said gently, Ziyan, if it weren't for this accident, you would already be my wife. You should change the way you address me. Yan Ziyuan blushed. After all, we are not married yet. She stood up and gave the rest of the bear meat to the other 3. Have a taste. Shenjuli naturally wouldn't eat it. He didn't even have the intention to take it. Yan Ziyuan did not dare to force him. As for Ning Shuima, she did not want to eat the food that Gu Ziyan roasted. Besides, she was already full and had no appetite, so she waved her hand and refused. Only Yifeng could not bear to refuse the bear meat that Yan Ziyuan handed over. He took a bite and secretly frowned. The meat was a little overcooked, and there was a little too much salt on it. Not only did it not suit his taste, but it also did not suit Yin Ziyuan's taste. Yin Ziyuan was a picky eater. In fact, he doubted that Yin Ziyuan could really eat until she was full. Is it delicious? Yin Ziyuan looked at him eagerly, as if she wanted to get a compliment from him about her sweetheart. Yin Ziyuan was now in a state where she would be happy as long as she was with her sweetheart, even if she ate chaff and swallowed vegetables. Yifeng could not bear to make her sad, so he nodded and replied, "It's okay." Yin Ziyuan was finally satisfied and returned to Gu Ziyan's side. She tasted the bear meat that was not roasted very well in small bites and ate it very happily. Chapter 1005. Yifeng was also eating slowly. After all, this was food given to him by Yin Ziyuan. No matter how bad it tasted, he would gladly swallow it without batting an eyelid. Ning Xiuma looked at Yin Ziyuan and Gu Ziyan, who were snuggling up to each other. Both of them were wearing bearskin coats and were very warm. Gu Ziyan even had a faint blush on his face. Clearly, he was very nourished. Then she looked at Yifeng. He was sitting alone at the side. His black clothes were almost frozen into iron. Because it was too cold, his face was pale, and even his lips were faintly purple. He lowered his eyes and ate that piece of bear meat. No one knew what he was thinking. They couldn't let that scumbag get away so easily. Why should that scumbag wear the bearskin that Yifeng risked his life to get? Ning Xiuma suddenly took a step forward. Her eyes were fixed on Gu Ziyan's face. She frowned and said, "Something's wrong." Yin Ziyuan saw her serious expression and was shocked. What's wrong? Ning Xiuma's expression became even more serious. Child Gu's complexion doesn't look right. I'm afraid his illness is about to act up. Yin Ziyuan's expression changed drastically. She hurriedly looked at Gu Ziyan's complexion. She didn't understand medicine, so she couldn't tell what was wrong. What's wrong? I think his complexion is very good. His cheeks are flushed, and there are bleeding spots. His lips are faintly discernible. Ning Xiuma said a lot of professional words in one breath. Yin Ziyuan was stunned. Gu Ziyan was also full of doubts. He couldn't help but touch his own face. Of course, he couldn't feel anything. He didn't feel that anything was wrong either. When he heard Ning Xiuma mention his complexion, he said instinctively, "His face is red because of the heat and the fire, right?" Ning Xiuma sneered, "What do you know? This is clearly the rise of the virtual yang fire, attacking the run and do meridians." She said a bunch of professional words and finally came to a conclusion. "I'm afraid you can't let the heat get to you. Otherwise, the virus in your body will wreak havoc and cause your illness to flare up in advance. I'm afraid his life will soon be in danger." "Xiuma, what should we do?" Yin Ziyuan was anxious. "It's very simple. Child Gu's illness can only tolerate the cold and not the heat. Not only can you not eat the bear meat, you can't wear the bearskin robe either. Otherwise, your life might be in danger." Gu Ziyan was not a fool. He knew that Ning Xiuma did not have a good impression of him. She might be lying to him, so he was still a little skeptical. Moreover, after he put on the bearskin, his body felt much warmer and more comfortable. How could he bear to take it off? Maybe Mrs. Ning saw wrongly? "I feel pretty good." Just as he said this, his stomach suddenly felt like it had been scalded by lard. It was so painful that he groaned. His body trembled as if he was suffering from malaria, and he fell to the ground with a plop. "Look, your illness is flaring up, right?" Ning Xiuma took a step back, shook her head, and sighed. "You just don't believe me." Yin Ziyuan looked at Gu Ziyan's twitching body on the ground and panicked. "Xiuma, what should we do?" "What should we do?" "You have to save him. Take off his bearskin robe first and let him dry here for a while. Maybe he'll get better soon." Yin Ziyuan immediately took off the bearskin robe on Gu Ziyan's body. She was afraid that it was not enough, so she let him lie on the ice. Ning Xiuma took the robe and handed it to Yifeng. "Yifeng, you can wear this robe yourself. Child Gu does not have the fortune to enjoy it." Yifeng looked at Ning Xiuma with a complicated gaze. Chapter 1006. Yifeng naturally knew that this was Ning Xiuma's doing, but made him feel a lot better. He put on the bearskin without hesitation. Naturally, he warmed up a lot, and his blood vessels that had been frozen by the cold sea water could finally flow normally again. Yifeng had given the bearskin to Guzian because he was afraid that Yin Ziyuan would be unhappy. He was afraid that she would throw a tantrum when she saw that there was no one she liked. After the scene just now, he no longer had any misgivings. Guzian had finally warmed up in the bearskin. Now that it was suddenly taken away and placed on the ice, he was frozen to the point of ecstasy. He was shivering on the ground. Xiuma, why isn't he feeling well? Yin Ziyuan anxiously circled Guzian. It doesn't matter. When the heat poison in his body is absorbed by the cold air, he should be able to recover. Ning Xiuma's tone was certain. Then she glanced at Shunjuli. The goo poison in Guzian's body was planted by the Almighty, so he could naturally control his condition at any time. He didn't even move, but he cooperated perfectly with Ning Xiuma. He still didn't say anything, but his fingertips moved slightly in his sleeves. Yin Ziyuan was an impatient person. She pulled Ning Xiuma's hand and asked, Xiuma, how can we make the heat poison in his body disappear faster? Ning Xiuma looked at the turbulent sea water under the island and muttered, maybe it'll be better if we use seawater to bathe him. Damn it, she also wanted to let this Guzian have a taste of the ice sea. Yifeng saw that Ning Xiuma was playing with Guzian. Although he was happy to see it, he was afraid that she would kill him and cause other accidents. He sent a message to Xiuma. Xiuma, I'm afraid his body can't withstand the water. He will freeze to death in the sea. Ning Xiuma also sent a message to him. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. She was a doctor, so she could understand the general condition of Guzian's body and his tolerance by checking his breathing. His body was not as weak as it appeared. This bastard looked weak. Firstly, he was acting in front of Yin Ziyuan. Secondly, he was delicate and didn't want to work, so he took advantage of the situation to pretend to be Brother Lin. I'm afraid he won't be able to swim by himself in this state. Yin Ziyuan muttered to herself. She then made up her mind. I'll take him down to soak. This silly girl, with her small body, if she soaked in the sea water, she would probably fall sick. Before Ning Xiuma could say anything, Yifeng said, no way. If he wants to soak, I'll take him in. He would never allow anything to happen to Yin Ziyuan, and he didn't want her to suffer any more pain. Stupid. Why do you need to soak him in the water? Can't you just pour water on him? Ning Xiuma couldn't help but facepalm. She didn't say that she was going to throw Guzian into the water. These two people were so quick to snatch this job. Yin Ziyuan's eyes lit up. She immediately looked at Yifeng. Yifeng, you can control water, right? Why don't you get some water and pour it on him? Pour water on him? I can do that. The little Qilin, who had just reached the shore, answered in high spirits. Without waiting for Ning Xiuma and the others to respond, it opened its big mouth, and the seawater below automatically surged up and splashed down on Guzian, who was trembling on the ground to the point of almost losing consciousness. Shunjuli took advantage of the situation and silently withdrew the spell that had made Guzian unconscious. Guzian was shocked by the cold seawater and jumped up like a shrimp in a pot of oil. Cold, 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 cold. Chapter 1007. Guzian's hands and feet were frozen stiff. Just as he jumped up, he tripped and tumbled down. Because the weather was too cold, his clothes were already frozen. He couldn't stop the momentum of the fall and slipped far away. Yan Zin didn't manage to catch him and could only look on helplessly as he screamed miserably and fell into the sea with a splash. Yin Ziyuan was scared out of her wits. She subconsciously wanted to jump as well, but Yifeng stopped her. Don't be afraid. Let me do it. He turned around and was about to jump into the sea to save Guzian, but Kirin was one step ahead of him. She also jumped into the sea with a splash. After a while, Kirin used her head to push Guzian out of the sea. Guzian was choking and freezing in the sea. His face was pale, his lips were bruised, and his eyes were tightly shut. This time, he really fainted. Yifeng didn't wait for Yin Ziyuan to speak again and immediately performed first aid. He was very experienced in saving drowning people. After a while, Gu Zian finally woke up. As soon as he woke up, he shivered and stared at Yin Ziyuan's white bear fur coat. He couldn't wait to tear it off for her and put it on himself. Yin Ziyuan naturally knew that he was cold. She felt cold just looking at him with ice shards all over his body. However, for his health, she still advised him to endure it. Zian, your body really can't get too hot. You will faint if you get too hot. You almost died just now. If I didn't let the cold air draw out the heat toxins in your body in time, you would still be unconscious. You have to endure it. As long as you find the ice flame flower, you will be fine after consuming it. Gu Zian's lips trembled a few times. He felt that he would freeze to death before he could find the ice flame flower. Now, from the tip of his hair to the soles of his feet, every cell in his body was screaming the word cold. Every blood vessel in his body was flowing with the word cold. Many parts of his body were so cold that he couldn't feel them. He couldn't even feel the existence of his little brother, cold. He had never been so cold in his entire life. He never knew that falling into the water in this weather could be so cold. He felt that all the joints in his body were about to freeze. Every time he moved, they would make cracking sounds. Because his clothes were already frozen stiff, he was like a robot that couldn't support his body. Ziyuan, help me get a set of clothes. Even if he couldn't wear the bearskin robe, at the very least, he had to change into dry clothes. Otherwise, he might really freeze to death. Yin Ziyuan, however, was afraid that her previous efforts would be wasted if she didn't do it well. She immediately looked at Ning Xuema. Ning Xuema scrutinized Gu Zian's face. She couldn't play with him anymore, or she would die. She nodded. You can change into dry clothes, but they can't be too thick. Yin Ziyuan ran to the front of the car and rummaged through the cabinets. After a while, she took out a set of lined robes and handed it to Gu Zian. Gu Zian wanted to cry, but had no tears. Give me a cotton one. If he wore a lined robe in this weather, he would freeze into an ice sculpture. Yin Ziyuan looked at Ning Xuema again. Ning Xuema smiled slightly and didn't say anything. Yin Ziyuan immediately advised Gu Zian, Zian, for the sake of your health, can you bear with it? Look at Mr. Han. He's wearing a thin robe, but he doesn't seem to be cold. Ning Xuema turned around and glanced at Shunjuli. The Almighty was wearing a long robe with the color of the moon. Under the starlight and the cold wind, his eyes were distant, as intoxicating as the moonlight. He was indeed wearing a thin robe. If anyone wore a thin robe on a cold day, Ning Xuema would feel cold for them. She couldn't wait to find a leather coat for them. Chapter 1008. But when the great god was dressed like this, no one felt cold for him. It was as if he was supposed to be like this, like a celestial being on top of a snowy mountain. Although Yin Ziyuan couldn't see Shunjuli's appearance clearly, she could still feel his aura. Although that person was traveling with them, he always felt like he was beyond the 9 heavens, separated from them by thousands of mountains and rivers. It made her feel like she was looking up at a tall mountain, and she never dared to treat him as a companion. How did Master Han cultivate this kind of temperament and strength of character? Perhaps only the venerable emperor could be compared to him. Ning Xuema seemed to understand Yin Ziyuan's thoughts at this moment. Her man was praised by her good friend, and she was very proud. But her heart was moved, and she immediately took the opportunity to persuade Yin Ziyuan, the great god's physique belongs to the cold, and he can't be cold. His cultivation is shallow, and he often cultivated in places like the ice fields to improve his resistance to the cold. After a long time, his aura was revealed, and now he's not afraid of the cold. Yin Ziyuan's eyes lit up. She saw the interaction between Ning Xuema and the great god with her own eyes. The two of them were so close, so it wasn't strange that Ning Xuema knew about Master Han's past. So she believed that what Ning Xuema said was true. She immediately persuaded Gu Zian, who was about to change his jacket into a cotton-padded one. She told him about Master Han's cultivation and then pulled Gu Zian's ice-cold hand. Zian, what Master Han could do, you're so smart, so you can definitely do it too. Just bear with it, and wait until you get used to it. Gu Zian was so cold that his joints were stiff. When he heard Yin Ziyuan's words, he almost burst into tears. How could he be compared to Master Han? He would probably be frozen to death if he got used to it. He didn't listen to Yin Ziyuan and limped towards the car. He wanted to rely on himself to take his clothes. Unfortunately, the Red Crown crane was too tall. It was almost as tall as a one-story building. If he was fine, he could easily jump onto the crane. However, his joints were as stiff as wood, and he could barely walk like a robot. There was no way he could jump onto a vehicle. He tried twice, but to no avail. He turned around and looked at Yin Ziyuan with a face full of despair. Ziyuan, if you don't want me to die, help me get a set of cotton robes. He was so cold that his tongue was almost tied up. Yin Ziyuan's heart softened when she saw how pitiful he looked. She looked at Ning Xiuema again. Ning Xiuema didn't say anything. She just glanced at Yifeng. Yifeng had also just jumped out of the frozen sea not long ago. When he came ashore, his limbs were also stiff. Even his hair was frozen into ice. However, he didn't say that he was cold. He even did this and that for them. He even hunted a big white bear. Compared to him, Gu Ziyan seemed so useless. Yin Ziyuan probably thought of this too. She tried to persuade Gu Ziyan to bear with it. Didn't Yifeng manage to bear with it? Gu Ziyan was so angry that he blurted out, Yifeng is a sharkman. He will be fine if he goes into the sea. Besides, he is full of love. He paused. Ning Xiuema chuckled. Child Gu, you're wrong. Yifeng is indeed a sharkman. However, he is a sharkman from the warm sea in the south. He is not from here. He is not used to this sea. As for being full of love, Child Gu doesn't really love Ziyuan. Can't he bear with it for her? Can't he be full of love? Chapter 1009. Gu Ziyan. He looked at Yin Ziyuan, who had been looking at him. I'm sincere to Ziyuan, but you guys make it sound so easy. Yin Ziyuan made up her mind and said, Ziyan, you have to bear with it. Otherwise, I'll accompany you. She raised her hand and was about to take off the bearskin coat. Yifeng's expression changed. No. Ning Xiuema raised her hand and pressed Yin Ziyuan's hand down. She said with a faint smile, Don't be silly. Your physique is completely different from his. You can't bear any cold. Otherwise, if the cold enters your body, you'll have all kinds of problems. Child Gu is already very touched and happy that you accompanied him to this wasteland to look for medicine. How can he bear to let you freeze for no reason? If he gets sick from the cold, he'll be heartbroken. Don't you think so, Child Gu? The last sentence was naturally directed at Gu Ziyan. What did Gu Ziyan say at this time? He could only force a smile with his teeth chattering. Yes. Ziyuan, you don't have to take it off. I'll bear with it. Yin Ziyuan finally stopped insisting. The small storm passed just like that. 3 of the 5 people were wrapped in warm bearskin coats. As for the other 2, one disdained to wear it, and the other couldn't wear it. Therefore, Gu Ziyan, who couldn't wear it, could only rely on exercise to increase his body temperature in order to resist the bone-piercing cold. As a result, Child Gu Ziyan, who was originally gentle and calm, even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of him, jumped a few times on the spot, as if there were springs installed under his butt. His image was completely destroyed. Yin Ziyuan's gaze followed Gu Ziyan, and she couldn't help but glance at Yifeng. It turned out that he was just as cold when he jumped into the sea, but he was able to persevere without batting an eyelid. He even did so many things. Yifeng was like a silent mountain, giving people a feeling of wanting to lean on him. On the other hand, Gu Ziyan was like a blooming flower. He was beautiful and attractive, but he could wither easily. Yin Ziyuan shook her head. No, Gu Ziyan was the man she had always liked. He would be her pillar in the future. She shouldn't use him as an analogy. Compared to him, all other men should be dung. Her gaze continued to follow Gu Ziyan. Everyone rested here for 4 to 5 hours before making their preparations. The cold weather caused people's physical strength to be depleted abnormally fast. Those who did not abstain from food were hungry again. Ning Xiuema pressed down on Shan Julie's hand that was about to reach for the food and suggested, I heard that there's a type of fish here that is especially delicious. Yifeng, your grilled fish skills are pretty good. Why don't you show off your skills here? Little apple, go down and catch the fish. When she suggested this, Yifeng's heart skipped a beat. He had told Ning Shuima before that his biggest regret in life was that Ziyuan had never eaten the fish that he grilled for her. Now that Ning Shuima said this, it was obvious that she was giving him this opportunity. He looked at Ning Shuima gratefully and immediately instructed Kirin which fish was more suitable to catch. Kirin agreed and immediately jumped into the sea to catch the fish. It was good at catching fish. After a while, it used its claws to catch 6 to 7 fish. It was the type of ice crystal fish that Yifeng wanted. Each fish was about 2 to 3 caddies in size. Its meat was fresh and tender. It was one of Yi Yu's favorite fish. This type of fish grew in the extremely cold sea. To sharkmen, this type of fish was an extremely rare delicacy. He had to use many things to exchange with other sea tribes to get 1 or 2. At that time, Yifeng couldn't bear to eat it himself, so he cooked it all for Yi Yu. Chapter 10:10. Now that he had seen this fish again, Yifeng recalled the scene from back then and felt an inexplicable, complicated feeling in his heart. Yifeng's heartstrings couldn't help but tremble. He could finally roast the fish that she wanted to eat the most with his own hands. He had just slaughtered 2 fish when Gu Ziyan suddenly walked over, took the other 2 fish, and silently slaughtered them as well. Naturally, his technique wasn't as nimble as Yifeng's. He scraped the scales off the fish's skin and ruined the fish's beauty. Yifeng's heart ached for the fish, and he couldn't help but say, "You don't have to do it. I'll roast it for everyone to eat." Gu Ziyan glanced at him and smiled. "Brother Yi has been too busy for us recently. I can't bear to see Brother Yi so tired, so I'll roast the fish for us." After saying that, he took the 2 slaughtered fish and slowly roasted them over the bonfire. Yifeng! He couldn't help but look at Yin Ziyuan. Yin Ziyuan was already squatting beside Gu Ziyan. Her eyes were bright as she watched him roast the fish, and her face was full of sweetness. "Ziyan, you're so thoughtful. I love eating the food you roast the most." Yifeng couldn't help but cut his hand in a moment of distraction. Blood flowed out and flowed onto the fish that he had just slaughtered. "This fish is dirty," he said hurriedly, and threw the fish that was stained with his blood back into the sea. He stood facing the sea for a while, and when he turned back, his expression was still calm as he prepared the other fish. Although Ning Shuima felt sorry for him in her heart, this was not the time for her to meddle in his affairs. She didn't look at Yifeng again, in case he felt even more embarrassed. For someone like Yifeng, what he wanted was never the pity of others. Yifeng and Gu Ziyan grilled the fish separately. Gu Ziyan also seemed to be holding his breath. The grilled fish was neither salty nor bland, and the control of the heat was also good. After grilling it, he handed it to Yin Ziyuan. Yin Ziyuan beamed with joy after taking a bite. This fish was much better than the bear meat. She immediately started eating in big mouthfuls, eating with great relish. Yifeng's fish was also ready. He gave it to Shun Juli and Ning Shuima first. This time, Shun Juli did not refuse and took it. Ning Shuima also took the one that was handed to her. The taste was unprecedentedly delicious. She gave him a thumbs up. "Yifeng, your grilling skills are comparable to that of a chef." She casually picked up the other grilled fish and walked over to Yin Ziyuan. "Ziyuan, come try this. Is it as delicious as I said?" Yin Ziyuan was slightly stunned. Just as she was about to take it, Gu Ziyan handed her another fish. "Ziyuan, I added another seasoning to this fish. Try it and see if it's different from the previous one." Yin Ziyuan naturally wouldn't refuse him. She took it and took a bite. She nodded. "Not bad. It's delicious." She smiled apologetically at Ning Shuima. "Shuima, these 2 fish are enough for me. I don't need to eat anything else. You guys can eat it yourselves." Ning Shuima was speechless. Yin Ziyuan didn't want to eat it, but she couldn't force it into her mouth. She could only take the fish and walk back. Yifeng lowered his eyes and ate his fish. The food that was once so delicious now tasted like wax in his mouth. It turned out that the fate between him and Yin Ziyuan was so shallow that she didn't even have the chance to eat his grilled fish again. The grilled fish feast passed with everyone having their own thoughts. Chapter 10:11. After eating the fish, the few of them continued on their journey. Ning Xiuma and Shun Juli were still riding on Kiran's back. After Ning Xiuma finished another round of cultivation, she lay in the Almighty's arms and said gloomily, "Almighty, the fate between Yi Feng and Yanzhen is really shallow." Yi Feng wanted to let Yanzhen eat his grilled fish, but he couldn't even fulfill such a small wish. Shun Juli said, "In this world, most things don't go your way. Yi Feng and Yanzhen originally had fate, but in order to let Yi Yu reincarnate, he sacrificed their fate. Then what we're doing now is there's still no possibility between them. It's hard to say. Right now, everything is unknown." Shun Jili shook his head. "In any case, it's better than having no fate at all." Ning Xiuma sighed deeply. She suddenly thought of something and looked up at the Almighty. "Almighty, are we fated to be together?" Shun Jili paused, looked down at her and asked, "What do you think?" Ning Xiuma giggled. "I guess it's fate. It seems like I can't avoid you no matter where I go. Our fates might be intertwined. There are so many fates that I can't count them all." Shun Jili was speechless. She made it sound like he would always stick to her. The fate between him and her. It seemed like even he couldn't see it. However, it should be fate, right? When she had just transmigrated, she had asked him for help. When he was cultivating in Tianshu Mountain, no one could go up, but she had barged in and even witnessed his most embarrassing moment, of course, since he had taken a fancy to her. Even if the heavens didn't arrange fate for them, he would snatch it back even if he had to snatch it. The person that Shun Juli wanted would never run away. "Almighty, you like me, right?" Ning Xiuma put her arms around his neck. Once she had confirmed her feelings for him, she didn't want to delay any longer. She wouldn't try to resist him either. Fate was a very mysterious thing. Once fate came, one had to grasp it properly and not let it slip away. Opportunities were like this, and so was fate. Therefore, Ning Xiuma wanted to confirm it. Shun Juli twirled the hair on her temples with his hand. "Do you still need to ask?" If he didn't like her, he wouldn't have followed her every step like he was her follower. This was the first time he had stared at someone so closely. "Then when are you going to marry me?" Ning Xiuma's eyes sparkled. Shun Juli's fingers, which were twining her hair, paused slightly. His eyes were deep. "Why do you ask this?" Ning Xiuma raised her eyebrows. "Since the two of you are in love with each other, you should naturally get married. Let's have a couple and return home together. Don't tell me you never planned to marry me." Of course, he was going to marry her. However, he couldn't say it until the time was right. Looking at Ning Xiuma's eyes that were as bright as stars, Shun Juli felt apologetic for the first time. He could only vaguely say, "Everything is up to fate. All right, you should practice and level up quickly." Ning Xiuma wasn't so easily fooled. Up to fate? This is too general and too official. I want a precise answer. She thought for a while and suddenly thought of something. She narrowed her eyes and looked at him. "Almighty, don't tell me you already have a wife. You only want to have a concubine with me?" She suddenly realized that her understanding of the Almighty was still very shallow. Other than knowing that he was the overlord of the Sun-Moon sect, the #1 person on this continent, and a friend of Rongjuishan and Yunshi, she really didn't know anything else. Chapter 10:12. This time, Shun Jili shook his head quickly. "No, you think too much. I have never married anyone." As soon as he said this, a conversation with a vague voice suddenly appeared in his mind. "Divine Lord, don't you like me? What do you think?" "I think you don't like me. Otherwise, why don't you want to be with me once? Be more reserved. Don't you feel embarrassed saying such things every day? I only say this to you. You're my husband. It doesn't matter if I say it a few more times." "You? Who taught you this?" "Stop it. Divine Lord, since we love each other, isn't it normal to be together? Come on, we need to get married. I am not a casual person. Then let's get married. I want to marry you." Shinjuli's body slightly stiffened. The conversation that suddenly appeared in his mind was too vague. He almost couldn't tell if it was a male or female voice, but strangely, it made his chest hurt. He frowned slightly. After so many years, this was the first time such a situation happened. He immediately tried his best to think about this vague voice, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't remember anything. There was only a blank, a blank. Even the conversation that had just rung in his mind had disappeared, leaving him unable to grasp any clues. He slightly frowned and shook his head. He didn't want to think about it anymore. He just wanted to grasp the present. As for the past, he didn't want to pursue it anymore. He pinched Ning Xiuma's face. Don't think too much. Hurry up and practice. It seemed like he really had something that he couldn't say. It was so obvious that he was beating around the bush. Ning Xiuma was a little uncomfortable. She looked at Shunjuli and didn't want to guess. She just wanted to get a definite answer from him. Do you want to marry me or not? Let's make it clear first. I don't want to be your concubine. If you want to marry me, you can only marry me. I want to be your wife. Do you agree? This girl was really difficult to deal with today. Shunjuli was helpless. Idiot, you should let the man do the marriage proposal. I'm the one who wants to marry you, and you still don't want to give me an answer. If I were to wait for you to beg me, wouldn't I have to wait for God knows when? Come on, answer me. Ning Xiuma was like a bully who was forcing him to marry her. She almost grabbed his collar and forced him to agree. Shunjuli was pestered by her to the point that he had no choice but to harden his heart and say, I will tell you when you reach Earth rank level 8. Ning Xiuma, she felt even more uncomfortable. Was it that difficult to say yes? Why did he have to wait for her to reach level 8 before he could tell her? He was clearly delaying things. Even if the Almighty didn't want to say it, she couldn't force him to say it with a knife. Ning Xiuma didn't want herself to think too much, but she had to. Could it be that he was just teasing her because he found her fun? Naturally, Shunjuli could tell that she didn't look good, but he could only pretend that he didn't see it. He urged her, all right, let's stop chatting. You should practice martial arts. Ning Xiuma's heart was burning with anger. She turned over and sat up in his arms, but she didn't want to meditate. She swung her small feet on Kieran's body. I don't want to practice martial arts today. She ignored Shunjuli and only chatted with Kieran. Kieran was originally depressed because it couldn't get a word in, but now that Ning Xiuma was talking to it, it was naturally happy. It was a talkative creature. If Ning Xiuma asked one question, it could answer 10 questions. One person and one beast chatted, so it wasn't boring. Chapter 10:13. Shunjuli was completely ignored by her. After flying for another day, the weather had become extremely bad. The north wind was bitterly cold, and the snowflakes were as big as plates. When they blew on their faces, they were as sharp as blades. In front of them was a vast expanse of ice. It was similar to the scenery of the North and South Poles in documentaries. Everywhere they looked, they could only see white snow. Snowy mountains, snowy valleys, snowy peaks. There were no other colors between heaven and earth. The ground was covered with a thick layer of ice, and on top of the ice was a thick layer of snow. As soon as the giant crane landed, its 2 long legs sank into the snow. It was so scared that it screamed and almost flipped over the carriage on its back. In such extreme cold, Gu Zian was wearing a cotton coat. Even so, when he opened the carriage curtain, he was sucked in a large mouthful of icy wind. He choked and coughed for a while. Seeing such deep snow, he did not want to come out of the carriage. His gaze fell on Ning Xiuma. Where is the ice flame flower? Ning Xiuma only replied with one word, find it. Gu Zian was stunned. He looked around and could not see the end of the vast expanse of ice. How is he going to find it? How am I going to find it? How long will it take? He had not even started looking, but he was already worried. Ning Xiuma smiled coldly. There are so many people running around for you. We are not annoyed, but you are? This sentence made Gu Zian choke. At this time, he knew that his life was in the other party's hands. This girl was not someone he could offend. He said embarrassedly, Madam Ning, you misunderstood. I feel bad for causing everyone to suffer in the cold. Since you feel bad, then stop talking nonsense. Ning Xiuma was still angry and did not want to listen to his nonsense. As expected, Gu Zian did not dare to say anything. He felt that Madame Ning's anger today was too big. He could not help but look at Han Shanhua. This Mr. Han had been standing there the whole time, not saying a word. As for his expression, his skill was too shallow. He couldn't even see his face clearly. So how could he tell? Shuama, what are the characteristics of this ice flame flower? Now that we understand its characteristics, it will be easier for us to find it. Yin Ziyuan popped her head out. Ning Shuama naturally didn't want to embarrass Yin Ziyuan. The flower of ice flame, as its name suggests, grows in volcanic areas on the ice field. Let's look for volcanic areas. Yin Ziyuan was confused. She didn't know anything about this. She could not help but look at Gu Ziyan. Gu Ziyan was also confused. What kind of volcanic area is this? How can I tell? Yifeng was, after all, a knowledgeable person. He nodded slightly. There must be geothermal heat in volcanic areas. The ice layer will be thin, and there will be surging sea currents. We can follow this clue. Then how do we find the undercurrent? Gu Ziyan asked. I can hear the sound of underground currents within a few miles. Yifeng answered. Since that's the case, let's split up. It'll be faster this way. Ning Xiuma immediately made a decision. They split up the teams. She was naturally in the same group as the great god. Gu Ziyan, Yin Ziyuan, and Yifeng were in the same group. Because Gu Ziyan was severely lacking in telekinesis, his qigong was greatly reduced. It was inconvenient for him to walk in the knee-deep snow, and he would be a burden to everyone. Therefore, Ning Xiuma used her with telekinesis to create a wooden raft that could slide in the snow. She had Kiran pull it. That group was naturally led by Yifeng. Ning Xiuma and Kiran had telepathy. This way, no matter who found the ice flame flower first, they would be able to quickly notify the other. Chapter 10:14. Although Ning Xiuma didn't have any experience of living in the ice field, she had at least watched movies like The Vertical Line about adventures in the North and South Poles, so she still had some knowledge. She told them to pay attention to dangerous places like snow holes and crevices. Naturally, they also had to pay attention to avalanches. She knew that Kiran wasn't very reliable in this aspect, so she simply told Yifeng about her experience and told him everything she could think of. Yifeng noted it down one by one. Shun Julie listened faintly at the side and said after a moment, So you're so long-winded too. She was really attentive to her friends. Ning Xiuma ignored him for the whole day and still didn't want to talk to him, so she pretended not to hear Shun Julie's words. After a few more words, Shun Julie finally lost his patience and pulled her hand to leave. If you continue to be long-winded, I'll leave. Heaven and earth were vast, and the whole world was silvery white. The surroundings were very quiet, as if all sounds were swallowed by the thick snow. A pair of beautiful people in white walked together with the wind. Wherever the two of them passed, the snow was forcefully blown away by the wind, creating a path. Extremely far away, it was still a vast expanse of white, but behind them, there was a perfectly straight path. The scene was very spectacular and beautiful, but if one looked closely, one side seemed to be forced. Let go. I can walk on my own. Ning Xiuma pulled her hand away. The Almighty had been holding her hand too tightly, so it hurt a little. Shenjili raised his eyebrows. You can walk on your own? Ning Xiuma raised her head. Of course, my psychokinesis has reached Earth rank level 4. Before she could finish her sentence, she felt Shun Juli let go of her hand. She reacted quickly and tried to land on the ground lightly. However, she did not expect her body to sink and fall into the thick layer of snow. The bone-piercing chill instantly spread through her limbs. Ning Xiuma was agitated and jumped up, but she couldn't get out. Her feet seemed to be sucked in by something. The fire psychokinesis in his body automatically revolved, dispelling some of the chill. When she turned back to look at the Almighty, he was still floating in the air with his clothes fluttering in the wind. Anger welled up in her, but before she could explode, she heard the Almighty say, The Tianquan snow here is rich in spiritual energy. It absorbs everything with spiritual energy. If you want to leave by yourself, you have to absorb all the spiritual energy here. Ning Xiuma, Guru, how wide is this Tianquan snow? Shun Juli's voice was still as light as flowing water, but Ning Xiuma could hear the hint of a smile in his voice. It's not wide, only about 10 miles in radius. Ning Shuama, within a radius of 10 miles? Ning Shuama, Guru, how long will it take for me to absorb all the spiritual power here? Shun Juli said casually, according to my estimation, you'll be able to absorb all the spiritual energy here in half a month at most, or 10 days at least. 10 days? 10 days worth of time is too long. No, Guru, hurry up and pull me out. Shun Juli's thin lips curved up, revealing a smile that made people feel like bathing in the spring breeze. He raised his hand and messed up her hair. The words he spat out made Ning Shuama want to smash him to death. Shuama, cultivate well. I believe you can walk out by yourself. Ning Shuama. She felt like she had shot herself in the foot. When did the Almighty become so two-faced? That's not right. The Almighty has always been two-faced. Although he looks like an immortal, you really can't judge a book by its cover. She was complaining in her heart when she suddenly heard Shun Juli's voice. Shuama, what are you silently criticizing me for? Chapter 10:15. Ning Shuama's heart skipped a beat. She raised her eyebrows slightly and asked, "Did you peek into my thoughts again?" Shun Juli's chest moved and stopped. His movements were as smooth as flowing water. Your thoughts are too intense. I don't want to look at them. They have already jumped in front of me. Ning Shuama was speechless. Her thoughts were already so wild that they could jump around the entire ice field. Would she be able to use her willpower to detect her surroundings if she continued to cultivate? Oh right, could Yi Feng's group last for 10 days on the ice field? She was forced to be planted here by the Almighty like a carrot and couldn't move for 10 days. What if something happened to Yi Feng? Ning Shuama said, Almighty, I don't mind if you plant me here. But if something happens to Yi Feng, we must get there in time. However, he would have to pull her out like a carrot. She felt embarrassed just thinking about it. She really cared about her friends all the time. Shun Jili patted her head and said, I know what to do. Ning Shuama gritted her teeth and finally calmed down. She worked hard to operate the fire psychokinesis in her body. On one hand, she maintained her body temperature, and on the other hand, she absorbed the spiritual power in Tianquan snow. Perhaps it was because no one had ever discovered the heavenly spring snow in this place. But the spiritual energy within it had accumulated to a terrifying degree after 10,000 years. When Ning Shuama started to absorb it, she felt the spiritual energy within the heavenly spring snow rush towards her like a monstrous wave. The impact almost caused her meridians to rupture. It was no longer her absorbing the spiritual power. It was the spiritual power rushing into her body. Ning Shuama almost fainted from the spiritual power. She felt this spiritual power in her body rushing everywhere. It was so strong that it almost broke her body. At this critical moment, the Almighty's cold voice sounded like flowing water. It was soothing and calming. Absorb the spiritual power of heaven and earth. Turn real into virtual. Turn virtual into real. A series of chants rang in her ears. She had never heard of them before. In such an uncomfortable moment, his incantation was like a sweet spring to her. She immediately absorbed it with all her might. Usually, she would only be able to understand the meaning of the incantation after seeing it twice. Now, she immediately understood it after hearing it once. She immediately followed his instructions to cultivate, digesting, and absorbing the spiritual energy that came from the snow in her body. As time passed by, the spirit energy that surged into her body was gradually absorbed by her meridians and converted into psychokinesis. It washed the two psychokinesis spiritual roots in her body over and over again. Under such powerful scouring, her two spirit roots were growing at a speed visible to the naked eye, becoming thicker and brighter. Ning Shuama didn't dare to be distracted. Once she was distracted, she would feel dizzy from the surrounding spiritual energy. She could only focus all her energy on digesting the spiritual energy. He didn't know how much time had passed. Perhaps it was 2 days, perhaps it was 3 days. Ning Xuema's wood spiritual root was the first to break through the peak under the cleansing of the spiritual power, and suddenly lit up. She didn't realize it herself, but Shun Julie, who had been guarding there, clearly saw that there was a circle of green light bursting out from her body. This green light was quite strange. It was green in the middle, and when it spread out, the edges were a beautiful red. Within the red, there was a faint purple. It was like a circle of strange Buddha's light was surrounding her. It resonated with the aurora flashing in the sky from time to time, and it was very beautiful. She had leveled up. Her blood vessels were much smoother in a split second. The surging psychokinesis flowed in her body, as if it was changing her muscles and bones. Everywhere it passed, it was cool and refreshing. Chapter 10:16. Ning Xuema felt as if her bones had become lighter by a few kilograms. That feeling was indescribably comfortable, as if she was floating on the clouds. Haha! She had finally reached Earth rank level 5. This was simply the speed of a rocket. It was even faster than using any cheat. At this rate, it was only a matter of time before she reached Earth rank level 6. As long as she reached Earth rank level 6, she would be able to practice the flying sword technique. If she really learned that technique, she would no longer be afraid of falling from high altitudes. If she leveled up, would she be able to break free from the shackles of the snow? Ning Xuema subconsciously took a deep breath, channeled the psychokinesis in her body, and abruptly pulled upwards. Normally, if she used this kind of skill, she would be able to jump at least 4 to 5 feet high. But now, her body only pulled upwards by a few centimeters. Originally, the surrounding snow had swallowed up her chest, but now her waist was almost exposed. Don't underestimate this level of advancement. The psychokinesis in her body flowed twice as fast as before. Originally, the psychokinesis in her body was like a small stream that flowed slowly on flat ground. Now, it was like a small river that had been injected with new water rushing forward. Her veins were also like a river channel that had been dredged, and the capacity to absorb was stronger. Furthermore, the absorption of the spiritual energy in the surrounding snow was even faster. She originally wanted to open her eyes and look at the scenery around her, but the spiritual power in the snow didn't show any signs of stopping. Besides, her fire psychokinesis was about to rise to a peak. If she worked harder, maybe in less than 6 to 10 hours, she would be able to raise it by another level. She gathered her thoughts and once again channeled her power inside. Just as she expected, after she cultivated for a few more hours, her fire psychokinesis had also leveled up to Earth rank level 3. After such a large round of cultivation, she had absorbed a lot of the spiritual energy in the Tianquan snow around her. Finally, it no longer crazily rushed into her body, allowing her to take a breather. She opened her eyes and saw Shun Julie sitting not far away. Below him was a snow stool. In front of him was a snow table, and on the table was a chessboard with black and white pieces crisscrossing. She looked around again. It was still dark, and the sky was still filled with snow. She could not tell how much time had passed. It should not have been long, right? 1 day, 2 days? 2 days at most. She first contacted the little Qilin. Kieran's loud voice could be heard. Master, I've finally contacted you. Woo-woo, it's been 5 days. Little Apple misses you so much. 5 days had already passed. She immediately sent a message. How are things on your side? How are the others? We did find a few volcanic areas, but we didn't find any of those flowers. That Guzian is really useless. He's been curled up on the raft like a monkey on the bridge. Our daily task is to put those dry rations on him, and when that little girl is hungry, we will heat it up for her to eat. We don't do anything else. The little Qilin's resentment wasn't small. He poured out his grievances to Ning Xuema. Obviously, everyone is busy running around for him, yet he acts like a big shot. That little girl did more than him. Ning Xuema was not surprised. Sometimes, it was difficult to see a person's character without experiencing some things. Gu Zian was able to maintain his gentlemanly demeanor when he was rich and luxurious. He also had the pride of scholar. He was handsome and could play the guqin well. Naturally, he was able to win the admiration of everyone. In particular, such a person could move the hearts of young ladies the most, making their hearts rise and fall with his attitude. Chapter 10:17. Once he experienced real hardships with Gu Ziyan, the flaws in his character would be exposed. For example, selfishness, laziness, and heartlessness when he was with Ning Xiuma. These flaws in his character were already exposed. Now that he was with Yi Feng and the others in such a harsh place for 5 days, it was natural that more of these flaws would be exposed. What about Yi Feng? Ning Xiuma asked. Yi Feng is all round, Kirin praised. At night, he built the igloo to keep everyone warm, looked for undercurrents, repaired the broken wooden raft, and fought with the snow wolves. He did almost all of it by himself. I dare to bet that if it weren't for him, that Gu Ziyan wouldn't have survived a day here. He would have died long ago. What about Ziyuan? How is she? That chick? Well, besides blindly falling in love with a scumbag, that chick is also a responsible person. When the snow wolves attacked, she also fought. Her arm was scratched, and Gu Ziyan said a lot of strange things. I'm so angry. If Master didn't tell me in advance, I would have killed him with my claws. They actually encounter a pack of snow wolves. Although Ning Xiuma didn't see the battle, it must have been very dangerous. Otherwise, Yan Ziyuan wouldn't have been injured. What's going on? Tell me. Ning Xiuma had been cultivating here for 5 days, so she naturally wanted to know the specific situation over there. Kirin was a chatterbox. As expected, she vividly described the situation at that time. It turned out that their group had been running around for a day without any results. They were all cold, hungry, and tired. Yi Feng found a place to shelter from the wind and used ice to build the igloo again. The ice shell under their feet was very hard, so it wasn't easy for Yi Feng to get the ice. It took a lot of effort to get a piece of ice. Therefore, Yi Feng's igloo was not very big. It could barely accommodate 3 people. Gu Ziyan had been holding it in for a few days. This time, he couldn't hold it in any longer. He said that it was too crowded in here and that it wasn't good for his recovery. It was also bad for Yan Ziyuan's health. He politely asked Yi Feng to build another one. There was really no need to squeeze in with them. If Ning Xiuma were here, she would probably throw Gu Ziyan out without a second thought and let him build an igloo by himself. Don't be so picky when you're using someone else's. However, Yi Feng always put Yan Ziyuan's wishes first. He didn't want to argue with Gu Ziyan and put Yan Ziyuan in a difficult position. Therefore, he came out quietly and endured his fatigue to build the second house. While he was busy outside, Yan Ziyuan came out of the igloo and helped Yi Feng move the ice. She didn't know if it was because she couldn't bear to see him like this. Yi Feng naturally didn't want her to do it. He asked her to go back and rest. Gu Ziyan also came out and said that he couldn't let Brother Yi work alone. He also started to help. However, he didn't have enough psychokinesis. His hands were more delicate than a woman's. He only managed to pry 2 pieces of ice off, and a layer of oily skin was worn out. Not only that, his hand slipped, and the ice fell to the ground. It hit his foot, causing a big bruise on the back of his foot. Yan Ziyuan felt sorry for him. She applied ointment for him and asked him to go back to the igloo to rest. Gu Ziyan stubbornly said that he wanted to go through thick and thin with Yan Ziyuan. If she didn't rest, how can a man like him rest? Yan Ziyuan had no choice but to take him to rest. Chapter 10:18. Yi Feng spent a lot of energy to build a smaller igloo. Yan Ziyuan's igloo was covered with 2 layers of snow wolf fur, and the door was also made with snow wolf fur to block the wind, so it was warmer. Because all the warm things were used for the other igloo, Yi Feng's small igloo had nothing left. Only the half of the bearskin he was wearing could at least ward off the cold wind. Among their group, Yi Feng spent the most energy and was also the most tired, so his rest time was also the shortest. He was also exhausted. After the igloo was finished, he asked Kirin to help keep watch for a while, and then he went into the igloo and fell asleep. Kirin pulled the wooden raft every day, so was actually quite tired, so it fell asleep at the door of Yifeng's igloo. Although Gu Ziyan and Yin Ziyuan were always together these days, they didn't have time to be alone, so of course, they couldn't find a chance to be intimate. The igloo was transparent, so they could see the layout of each other's igloo. So every move of the two people in the igloo could be seen clearly. He saw that Yifeng didn't keep watch at night, but was resting, so he wanted to be intimate with Yin Ziyuan. He always felt that in the past few days, Yin Ziyuan's eyes fell on Yifeng more and more. Although she was still cold to Yifeng and gentle to him, Gu Ziyan, he had a sense of crisis that his sweetheart was about to leave him. Although Gu Ziyan made a dead set on him with the twin life curse, he was still worried, fearing that Yin Ziyuan would suddenly wake up during this period. If that happened, then he would really lose everything. So he made up his mind and wanted to take advantage of Yifeng sleeping in the other igloo to completely take Yin Ziyuan for himself. Once a woman's body was taken over, her thoughts would only be with that person. Even if she suddenly regained her memories, she could only accept her fate. He was originally lying side by side with Yin Ziyuan on a few snow wolf skins, with a certain distance between them. Since he had this thought, he reached out and tried to hold Yin Ziyuan in his arms. Yinzin, who was originally in a daze, was woken up by his hug and kiss. She was an innocent girl who didn't know anything about relationships between men and women. Although she loved Gu Ziyan, she had never thought of having physical contact with him. Gu Ziyan's passionate kiss made her heart palpitate. Yin Ziyuan subconsciously wanted to avoid it, but since Gu Ziyan had already made up his mind, he naturally wouldn't allow her to avoid it. He coaxed her gently in her ear and took the opportunity to kiss the sensitive spots on her face. He boasted that he was talented in both literature and literature, so naturally, there were many girls who liked him. Among them, there was no lack of women who liked romantic occasions. These women were more shrewish and bold, and many of them took the initiative to throw themselves into his arms. His thinking was the thinking of men in that era, occasionally lingering in romantic occasions as a kind of elegant thing. For women who took the initiative to throw themselves into his arms on such occasions, he naturally wouldn't refuse. At most, he wasn't like other rich playboys who were not picky. When he met someone he liked, he would also choose a few pleasing and artistic women to sleep with, so he still had some means in this regard. Although he wasn't a flirting master, he still had some means to make women addicted. Yin Ziyuan was also obsessed with him because of the twin life curse. Gu Ziyan thought that he would succeed smoothly, but he forgot that Yin Ziyuan was a real virgin. She didn't understand this at all. Chapter 1019. Therefore, when Gu Ziyan kissed Yin Ziyuan, she was still obedient and let him do whatever he wanted. However, when he started to have other thoughts and started to touch her, she struggled as if she was scared. Yin Ziyuan also knew a bit of kung fu, so she unconsciously used her knee and bumped into his private part. Therefore, Gu Ziyan groaned and rolled to the side. He was in so much pain that he broke out in a cold sweat. Yin Ziyuan finally got her freedom. She was panicked and confused. She didn't dare to stay in the same room with Gu Ziyan. She broke free from his restraint and wanted to run out. Later, when she heard something behind her, she turned around to look at him. She was shocked when she saw Gu Ziyan rolling around in pain. She walked back to him and wanted to see how he was doing. However, Gu Ziyan took the opportunity to push her down and forcefully hold her down. He whispered in her ear that they were going to be husband and wife, and that this was the duty of a husband and wife. If she really liked him, then she had to accept him. When he said this, although Yin Ziyuan was scared, she didn't dare to struggle anymore. Because it was too cold, when her bearskin coat and cotton-padded jacket were taken off, she was shivering in fear and cold. She was shivering in her unlined clothes. Gu Ziyan was completely aroused by her. He half raised his body and began to take off his clothes. He took them off too quickly. After taking them off, he pressed Yin Ziyuan down on the bearskin again. Coincidentally, the commotion in his room had alarmed the little Qilin who was lying outside and taking a nap. When it saw that the situation in the igloo was not right, it immediately turned into a cat and flew over. It didn't know anything about romance, so it didn't know what Gu Ziyan wanted to do. But Ning Xiuma had told it in advance that if it saw Gu Zian pressing Yin Ziyuan down, and both of them were undressed, it must stop them. Now, the situation of Gu Zian and Yin Ziyuan was very similar to what Ning Xiuma had said. Therefore, Kirin flew in and scratched Gu Zian's white buttocks hard. Gu Zian screamed. 5 deep bloody wounds appeared on his buttocks. He couldn't help but jump up. He accidentally hit the low roof of the igloo. With a bang, a big bump appeared on his head, and he almost fainted. Such a violent movement naturally woke up the sleeping Yifeng. He opened his eyes and saw this scene. Gu Zian was almost naked, and Yin Ziyuan was also undressed. Even an idiot could see what had happened. Yifeng was furious. He rushed over in a few steps and pulled Gu Zian over, slapping him with his palm. Fortunately, Yin Ziyuan saw that the situation was not good and shouted in time. Yifeng's furious mind was sobered up. The slap missed and didn't kill Gu Zian. Although Gu Zian was scared badly, he was still able to justify himself when Yifeng threw him to the ground. He said that he and Yin Ziyuan were already engaged, and if it wasn't for this accident, she would have been his wife for several days. He couldn't restrain his feelings for Yin Ziyuan, and it was understandable that he treated her like this. Yifeng couldn't be bothered to argue with people like him. He only said coldly, "You two are still unmarried after all. If I see you bullying her again, I will directly cripple you." After saying this, he pulled Yin Ziyuan, who had already put on her clothes, out of the igloo. He put her in his own igloo, while Yifeng himself stood guard outside of the igloo. Chapter 10:20. After such a ruckus, Yifeng, who had not had a good rest for several days and nights, did not dare to sleep anymore. Over the past few days, he and Kirin had been taking turns to keep watch at night. Kirin was not very reliable, so Yifeng did not dare to put the heavy responsibility of keeping watch on him. Only when he could not hold on any longer would he let Kirin take over for a while. After such a thing happened, he simply did not want to sleep, and Gu Zian, who had lost so much face this time, did not dare to mess around anymore. He was angry and hateful, but he did not dare to really lose his temper. Although Yifeng had been merciful to him, it was only for the sake of Yin Ziyuan. If he really pissed him off, the situation would be difficult to deal with. Not to mention, he was still counting on Yifeng to help him find the ice flame flower to treat his illness. So although he hated Yifeng so much in his heart, he did not dare to show it on his face. He treated the wound on his butt and laid down to rest again. Perhaps the smell of blood on his body had spread too far, or perhaps it was just a coincidence. In the latter half of the night, they were surrounded by a pack of snow wolves. In fact, they had encountered snow wolves along the way, but they were only in 2s and 3s. Other than giving Yifeng and the others a few wolf fur mattresses, they did not pose a threat to them. But this time, there was a large pack of snow wolves. There were a total of 200 to 300 of them. Kirin was originally sleeping with Yin Ziyuan in the igloo. When she heard the commotion, Yifeng had already started fighting with the pack of wolves outside. The snow wolves here were unusually tall and fierce. Because it was not easy to find food on the ice field, their eyes were all red from hunger. Moreover, they were led by a wolf. By the time Yifeng discovered them, they had already been surrounded. Yifeng ordered Kirin to take care of the 2 people in the igloo while fighting with the pack of wolves in the snowstorm. Because Gu Zian and Yin Ziyuan were in 2 separate igloo, Kirin could only guard one igloo and not the other. It also had a problem with Gu Zian, so it mainly guarded the igloo where Yin Ziyuan was. When it saw that Gu Zian was in danger, it reluctantly went to help. In the face of life and death, Gu Zian naturally did not dare to pretend to be weak. He shouted for help and tried his best to defend himself. Fortunately, the door of his igloo was very narrow and only one snow wolf at a time. The snow wolves were ferocious. With his current strength, he was no match for them. If Kirin did not rush over to help him and tear the snow wolves into pieces in time, he was afraid that he would not be able to hold on for more than a quarter of an hour. Kirin felt that this was not a solution, so it let Gu Zian ride on its back and sent him to meet up with Yin Ziyuan. The 2 of them were in the igloo, so Kirin would not be tired from running back and forth. Moreover, the two of them would be safer. However, Gu Ziyan was frightened by the pack of wolves outside and did not dare to come out of the igloo no matter what. Yin Ziyan, on the other hand, saw that the situation was not right and immediately rushed out of the igloo where she was hiding. She wanted to meet up with Gu Ziyan. She rushed out too recklessly and did not inform Yifeng and Kirin in advance. When Yifeng realized that something was wrong, Yin Ziyan was already surrounded by 4 or 5 snow wolves. Yifeng was originally looking for the leader of the pack of wolves. When he turned his head and saw the situation, he was frightened. He ignored the wolves around him and rushed towards Yin Ziyan. He finally saved Yin Ziyan, but one of Yin Ziyan's arms was bitten by a snow wolf. Chapter 10:21. Yifeng was also scratched in the ribs by a wolf, as he was too anxious to save Yin Ziyan and was bleeding profusely. Yifeng escorted Yin Ziyan to the igloo and met up with Gu Ziyan. When Yin Ziyan was first in danger, Gu Ziyan saw it. He wanted to ask Kirin to help, but when he saw a fierce snow wolf break into his house, he shut his mouth and let Kirin fight with the wolf. He did not dare to say anything. After Kirin killed the wolf in the house, he found out what happened to Yin Ziyan. At that time, Yin Ziyan had already been rescued by Yifeng and was retreating. The wolves attacked them from time to time, and the two people were injured. Under the continuous attack of the wolves, they could not speed up their retreat. Kirin was anxious and wanted to rush out to help. However, Gu Ziyan was scared out of his wits by the snow wolves. When he saw Kirin about to go out to help, he was so scared that he desperately grabbed one of Kirin's hind legs to stop it from going out. He said that Ziyan was protected by Yifeng and nothing would happen to her. Because of this delay, Yifeng's arm was bitten by a wolf in order to protect Yin Ziyan. Kirin cursed, "Are you still a fucking man?" It kicked Gu Ziyan, who was hugging its leg, away and rushed out to help the two people. Because of Kirin's help, Yifeng and Yin Ziyan finally arrived at the igloo. Because they came fast enough, Gu Ziyan was not bitten by the wolves that rushed in again. Yifeng and Little Qilin joined hands and killed all the wolves in the house. Little Qilin guarded the entrance of the igloo. Whenever a snow wolf rushed over, Little Qilin would get rid of it, so they didn't encounter any danger for the time being. The 3 people in the house were all injured. Gu Ziyan had a gentle demeanor at this time, and pulled Yin Ziyan over to apply medicine for her wounds. Yifeng was afraid that Yin Ziyan's wounds would not heal easily, so he gave the bottle of medicine that Ning Shuma gave him to Gu Ziyan and let him apply it for Yin Ziyan. Yin Ziyan's wounds were not small, and almost half of the bottle of medicine was used up. After Gu Ziyan bandaged Yin Ziyan's wounds, he refused to return the bottle of medicine to Yifeng, saying that the rest of the medicine would be used to change the dressing for Ziyan in the future. Then, he put the bottle of medicine into his arms and threw a bottle of ordinary medicine to Yifeng, asking him to heal himself. Yifeng was naturally afraid that Yin Ziyan's wounds would relapse. He had always put her safety first, so he did not object and used the ordinary medicine to heal himself. Yin Ziyan felt sorry. She felt that Gu Ziyan's behavior was a little embarrassing, and she felt sorry for Yifeng. So she persisted in front of Gu Ziyan for once, and asked Gu Ziyan to return that bottle of top-grade medicine to Yifeng. Gu Ziyan felt that he had lost face, so he couldn't help but say a few words in a sarcastic tone, which made Kirin quite angry when she heard it. He said, "Ziyan, it's a good thing that Brother Yi is no longer your hidden guard. Otherwise, it would be considered a dereliction of duty for a hidden guard to let his master suffer such a serious injury under the protection of a hidden guard. He would be punished by his master. And everything that belongs to a hidden guard should belong to his master, including the medicine and even his life. If Brother Yi was still your hidden guard, then it would be his duty to protect you like this and give you the best medicine. You don't have to feel bad about it. Of course, Brother Yi is no longer your hidden guard, but Brother Yi has always prioritized you. If you return the medicine to him, it'll seem like you're drawing a line between you and him. Brother Yi will be very sad." Chapter 10:22. These words were said in a dignified manner, but they weren't. Yifeng glanced at Gu Ziyan. He couldn't be bothered to argue with him. so he didn't say anything. On the other hand, Kieran, who was blocking the entrance and killing the wolves, turned around and scolded, "Bullshit!" Yin Ziyuan held back for a moment, then finally said, "Zian, Yifeng's identity is now my older brother, not a hidden guard. His injuries are so serious. Normal medicine can't stop his bleeding at all. You should return the medicine so that he can recover quickly. There are still so many wolves outside. They haven't retreated yet, so who knows what they're planning." This was the first time Yifeng heard her call him older brother. His heart trembled, and his fingers that were applying medicine trembled slightly. He didn't need to ask to know that Ning Xuema must have told Yin Ziyuan about her past life, and Yin Ziyuan obviously trusted Ning Xuema, so she naturally believed in that past life. Her words meant that she acknowledged him as her older brother. Ever since Yifeng left the Sun Moon sect and came to her side, Yin Ziyuan had been even more blunt with him. When he appeared in front of her, she once pointed at his nose and told him to scram. She said that he was the person she hated the most in her life, and the person she didn't want to see the most was also him. She said that if he really wanted her best, then he shouldn't appear in front of her again. Those words were extremely hurtful, and it also caused Yifeng to leave dejectedly. From then on, he really didn't appear in front of her again. It wasn't until her wedding that he appeared with Shun Julie and Ning Xuema until now. On the way here, Yin Ziyuan was still cold to him, obviously rejecting him. Even if Yifeng sat across from her, he still felt like there was a thorn in his back. This was the first time she had spoken up for him. It was also the first time she had called him her brother. Gu Zian's heart was in turmoil. Just as he was about to say that he was fine and that he would keep the medicine for her, Gu Zian spoke again. "We are now hiding in this ice house. With Kieran guarding the door, they won't be able to get in. They won't be able to take advantage of us anymore and will slowly disperse. We won't be in any danger anymore. Brother Yi can stay in the house and heal himself. There's no need to waste such a good medicine. Don't you agree, Brother Yi?" When he was safe, he was very eloquent and eloquent. Even he himself felt that what he said was the truth, so he became more and more confident. Although Yifeng had willingly given the medicine to Yin Ziyuan, he still felt uncomfortable when he heard Gu Zian's words. He coldly glanced at Gu Zian, thinking that this person's character was so low. What if Ziyuan still loved him after the twin life curse was broken? Wouldn't he be wrong for the rest of his life? Yin Ziyuan also faintly felt that the person she loved was not right in terms of character, which made her feel slightly disappointed. After going through such a series of crises, the disgust she had for Yifeng in her bones was gradually disappearing. Her gaze could not help but linger on his body. She was quite disapproving of Gu Zian's words. Just as she was about to say something, she suddenly heard a loud bang and the ice house shook. Everyone looked out in surprise and found that the pack of wolves had scattered around the ice house. They were no longer blindly rushing in from the door. They were actually using their bodies to desperately hit their ice house. Because the ice house was mainly used to keep out the cold, it was not particularly sturdy. After being hit by the pack of wolves for dozens of times, it showed signs of collapsing. Chapter 1023. Once the igloo collapsed, these people would once again be exposed to the wolves. Yifeng would be fine, but Yin Ziyuan and Gu Zian would most likely lose their lives. Gu Zian's face turned pale with fright. At this time, he no longer cared about hogging the medicine. He finally returned it to Yifeng and said earnestly, "Brother Yi, Ziyuan is right. This medicine belongs to Brother Yi, so it's better for you to use it yourself. Brother Yi, hurry up and get better." These wolves suddenly changed their tactics. It must be the wolf king among them who is playing tricks. Brother Yi, try to kill the alpha wolf. Without a leader, the wolves will naturally retreat. Although his character was not good, his last sentence was still very reasonable. Yifeng naturally understood this. He was looking for the alpha wolf just now. After Gu Zian finished speaking, Yifeng did not respond, nor did he refuse. He applied the medicine on himself. He meditated for a moment to recover his strength. Before his wound was completely healed, he rushed out again. He left Kieran at the entrance of the igloo to protect the two people in the room. Yifeng's kung fu was extremely powerful. Normally, these snow wolves would not be able to hurt him even if they joined forces. However, because he had not had a good rest recently and was injured, his kung fu was greatly reduced. Even so, not long after he went out, he cleared away the wolves that were ramming around the igloo, allowing Yin Ziyuan and the others to finally be temporarily safe again. Because the igloo was translucent, they could still vaguely see the scene outside from inside the igloo. Yin Ziyuan's gaze could not help but follow Yifeng, who was fighting outside. No one knew what she was thinking. Gu Ziyan had to call her a few times before she finally reacted. This made Gu Ziyan very jealous. He gently held her in his arms again, looked into her eyes, and whispered to her. Naturally, he also took the opportunity to strengthen the control of the twin curse. After this happened a few times, Yin Ziyuan's gaze finally stopped looking outside. She could not help but follow him. After Gu Ziyan killed Yin Ziyuan, he was actually very concerned about Yifeng's results. After all, they could only be truly out of danger if Yifeng killed the alpha wolf. He saw that after Yifeng killed more than a dozen snow wolves, he was caught off guard and was bitten on the thigh by a wolf. He fell to the ground. Gu Ziyan was still shocked, but he held back and did not say anything. Instead, he held Yin Ziyuan in his arms, who wanted to look back again in case she saw that scene, and ordered Kirin to save them. Yifeng was surrounded by the pack of wolves. Gu Ziyan only saw wolves being slapped away from time to time, but he could not see Yifeng's situation. Just as he was about to jump out of his skin, he noticed that the pack of wolves flashed in all directions. A shadow that was much more powerful than the other snow wolves descended from the sky and pounced on Yifeng, who was still lying on the ground. It wanted to kill him with one blow. This was the alpha wolf that commanded the pack of wolves. Yifeng, who was on the ground and could not get up, suddenly got up. He risked being torn apart by the pack of wolves and directly pounced on the alpha wolf. Falling to the ground just now was his trick to lure the enemy. He paid the price of an injured leg and finally succeeded in luring the alpha wolf. After another fierce battle, Yifeng finally killed the alpha wolf. The pack of wolves had no leader. Knowing that they could not gain any advantage here, the pack of wolves finally dispersed and resolved this crisis. Yifeng was injured in many places. Fortunately, he had the medicine that Ning Xiuma gave him. Otherwise, he was afraid that he would lose his life here. Chapter 1024. By the time Ning Xiuma got in touch with the little Qilin, the crisis had only been resolved for 4 hours. Kirin told Ning Xiuma about what had happened over the past few days. After half an hour, Ning Xiuma finally understood the situation over there. Gu Ziyan's behavior was also within her expectations. Ning Xiuma already knew his character, so she just sneered back and then told Kirin to keep an eye on those two people. She must not let Gu Ziyan take advantage of Yin Ziyuan again. Originally, Ning Xiuma had an idea. If Yin Ziyuan still loved that man blindly after the twin curse was broken, then she would fulfill their wish and let them fly together. But after this series of events, she completely understood the nature of this child Gu. He was a standard scumbag. So Ning Xiuma secretly made up her mind. If it really came to that, she would get rid of this scumbag and let Yin Ziyuan completely give up on him. She would rather let Yin Ziyuan hate her in the future than watch her jump into the fire pit. She asked a few people about the current situation. The crisis over there had been resolved, and Yifeng was recuperating. Gu Ziyan probably felt guilty, or maybe he knew that he absolutely could not leave Yifeng. So he also took the initiative to go outside to peel the wolf skin and roast the wolf meat so that everyone could recover their strength as soon as possible. Overall, it was peaceful over there now. According to Kirin, Yifeng had already planned his itinerary for tomorrow. He was prepared to go to the southeast of the ice field to take a look because he had already noticed that the ice flow there seemed to be a little strange. According to his judgment, there should be a large volcanic belt over there. Ning Xiuma finally felt relieved. Just as she was about to interrupt the conversation with Kirin, she was caught off guard by Kirin's question, which made her feel embarrassed. Master, these days you and the great god have also searched a lot of places, right? Did you find any clues? Ning Shuima looked at the snow around her. She was too embarrassed to say that she had been planting radishes here these days. So she said vaguely, "Well, I'm looking for it, but I haven't found anything yet." She temporarily stopped the telepathic communication and turned to look at Shun Julie. He was shocked when he saw that Shun Julie was nowhere to be seen. Did he abandon her and leave? Impossible, right? Or was he invisible? Did he want her to be anxious? Was he that bored? Ning Shuima was a little angry with him, so she didn't pay much attention to him these days. When he spoke to her, she would try her best not to respond. In addition, she had to constantly absorb the spiritual energy of the spirit spring snow, so she had no time to talk to him. In the past few days, he had not spoken more than 10 sentences to him. Every time she opened her eyes to look at him in between training, he was playing chess with himself. Chapter 1025. She hated the fact that the Almighty was pulling her as he ran, so she didn't see her surroundings clearly and let him go. She was trapped here and couldn't get out until now. Ning Shuima once again tried to struggle outwards, but after struggling for a few centimeters, she couldn't break free anymore. It seemed that Shun Julie was right. She had to suck up all the spiritual energy in the spirit spring snow to get out. She closed her eyes and was about to circulate her energy again when she suddenly heard heavy footsteps from afar, as if a small mountain was moving towards her at high speed. Her heart jumped, and she quickly opened her eyes. Looking in the direction of the sound, her expression changed. A snow bear. A super snow bear that was twice as big as the one Yi Feng killed on Ice Island a few days ago was running towards her like a moving small mountain. Its running speed was not slow. Perhaps it was trying to avoid the ice and snow, or perhaps it smelled Ning Shuima's scent and decided to treat her as its next meal. Therefore, it directly ran towards Ning Shuima's direction. Such a heavy body, but it ran as if it was flying in the snow. In the blink of an eye, it was already at the edge of the snow. Its silver fur was like satin, and its pair of eyes were like blood-red lanterns. It stared fixedly at Ning Shuima, who was trapped there. Suddenly, it raised its head and let out a long roar. Its two claws opened wide as its body leaped up, gliding several li in the air. It was like a bear mountain as it came crashing down on Ning Shuima. Damn it, this stupid bear knew how to glide in the air. Now that Ning Shuima was planted here, she had nowhere to hide. She could only watch helplessly as that guy pounced on her. Damn it, if she was hit by this bear, wouldn't she become a meat patty? Maybe it misjudged the direction, but the big white bear missed and fell about 10 meters away from Ning Shuima. Half of its body was buried in the snow, and then it couldn't move anymore. The big white bear didn't get what it wanted to eat, but it was very angry that it was trapped here. It was obviously a hot-tempered creature, as its roars resounded throughout the entire snowfield. It stared at Ning Shuima and struggled with all its might, but it couldn't move. It waved its two bare claws at Ning Shuima, and the wind it created blew Ning Shuima's hair into a mess. Its imposing manner was extremely shocking. After Ning Shuima glanced at it a few times, she knew that this fellow would not be able to come over for the time being, so she ignored it. However, this fellow's cries were extremely noisy. One after another, the bear's roars rang in her ears without any intention of stopping. Ning Shuima was greatly disturbed. She simply made a few snowballs and threw them over, wanting to block its wide-open mouth. However, this guy was smart. He used his bare paw to slap the snowball away and continued to roar at Ning Shuima. Seeing that the delicious food was right in front of its eyes, but it couldn't eat it, it was very angry. After roaring for a while, it had an idea. It opened its mouth, and a large column of water shot out from its mouth towards Ning Shuima. It wanted to drown Ning Shuima to death first before anything else. Ning Shuima was naturally prepared. She raised her hand and quickly weaved a green shield in front of her, blocking the stinky water column. The water column was quite powerful, and Ning Shuima's arm was numb from the impact. A sharp light flashed in her eyes. If she didn't kill this bear now, she was afraid that she wouldn't be able to rest until she got away. Therefore, After blocking this water column, she simply opened her hand, and countless green wooden awls condensed in her palm. She then waved her hand, and the awls scattered like flowers from a celestial maiden, flying towards Big White, who was also trapped and unable to move. Chapter 1026. The white bear could not avoid it either. Ning Shuma's wooden spikes, except for the ones that were swatted away by the bear's paws, landed on the bear's body. The big white bear's skin was coarse and thick, so the wooden spikes couldn't even pierce through its oily skin in the slightest. Instead, it angered its temper. With a wave of its paw, rows of ice blades shot towards Ning Shuma. A human and a beast were trapped here at the same time, and they began to fight. Since they could not move, they could only use their hidden weapons to attack each other. The white bear relied on its thick skin, and Ning Shuma's hidden weapons only scratched its body. Ning Shuma was also a quick-witted person. She quickly congealed a shield around her body. After she leveled up, congealing these shields was much easier. She could congeal them almost instantly. Almost all of the white bear's water attacks landed on her wooden shield. Ning Shuma, on the other hand, wasn't able to deal with it as easily as it did. That thing's body was big, and its strength was frightening. The water jets and ice blades it spat out were comparable to cannonballs, causing Ning Shuma's arm to feel numb from the impact. After attacking and defending, Ning Shuma's psychokinesis was depleted by more than half. An idea came to her, and she immediately absorbed spiritual energy from the snow to convert it. After a while, the psychokinesis in her body was replenished again. The white bear seemed to be able to absorb the spiritual energy here as well. After attacking Ning Shuma for a while, it would stop for a while, and then attack her again as if it was injected with new energy. The veins on Ning Shuma's forehead throbbed. It seemed that any creature could absorb the spiritual energy here. She could not go on like this. Although her psychokinesis could help her recover quickly, her physical strength was still limited. In terms of physical strength, she was obviously not the bear's opponent. Therefore, she had to hurry up and get out of the snow mire. Only when her body was free could she have more leeway. In other words, she had to absorb all the spiritual energy here as soon as possible. Of course, once the spiritual energy in this place was sucked dry, she would be able to escape, but at the same time, the big white bear would also be able to escape. Thus, after both of them escaped, she still had a tough battle to fight. However, as long as she could escape, she would have a chance of winning. If she continued to waste time here, she would definitely die. Having figured this out, Ning Shuma fought with the big white bear while crazily absorbing spiritual power into her dantian. Endless spiritual energy surged wildly into her dantian, but it did not leave a trace. Ning Shuma even suspected that her dantian was actually a bottomless pit that could not be filled no matter how much spiritual energy she had. The big white bear replenished another round of spiritual energy. It opened its mouth wide, and a water column several times larger than the previous one came pouring down on Ning Shuma. Ning Shuma's wooden shield shattered instantly. She was shocked and immediately reinforced it with 3 layers of wooden shields. The big white bear roared angrily, and the water column doubled in size. The first layer of wooden shield broke, and then the second layer. Ning Shuma's arms were slightly sore, and her forehead was even sweating slightly. However, she did not dare to be careless. She focused all her attention on reinforcing the last layer of shield. At the same time, she was multitasking, increasing the speed at which she poured spiritual energy into her dantian. Slowly, she felt that her waist could move. She was overjoyed and desperately tried to absorb the spiritual energy. Then, her thighs could also move slightly. The spiritual energy in the Tianquan snow was decreasing. She would be able to come out soon. Kacha! Kacha! Ning Shuma was shocked. She looked up and saw that the third layer of wooden shield had a few cracks under the big white bear's powerful water column attack. Chapter 1027. Ning Xiuma didn't have enough energy to build the fourth layer of the wooden shield. If it were a normal person, they would have panicked by now. However, she was a battle-hardened special agent who had experienced countless life-and-death situations. Ning Xiuma quickly calmed down. As she strengthened the third layer of the wooden shield, she kept a close eye on the bear's movements, waiting for it to reveal its weakness. The cracks on the wooden shield were getting bigger and bigger. It was on the verge of collapsing. It could shatter at any moment, perhaps in the next second. In this extremely cold place, Ning Xiuma was so tired that she was sweating all over. The bear also seemed to be tired. Perhaps it was because victory was in sight and the prey was about to be in its hands, but it also relaxed a little. The water column in its mouth finally became smaller. Ning Xiuma was waiting for this moment. She instantly condensed the wooden shield into a long green sword. She went against the current and stabbed it into the bear's mouth like an arrow. The bear was shocked and instinctively closed its mouth. The long green sword hit the side of its mouth with a clang. Although it didn't pierce through its skin, it cut off a large chunk of the white fur around its mouth. The bear was instantly enraged. It used all its willpower to spit out a huge water column with a diameter of more than 10 meters. It charged straight at Ning Xiuma. If she was hit, she would be going to meet God. Ning Xiuma increased the speed at which she absorbed the spiritual power in her body. When the water column was in front of her, she suddenly jumped out and flew a few meters away. Phew, damn it, she was so tired. She finally got rid of the Tianquan snow's restraint. Bang! The big white bear's water column smashed into the place where she originally stood, stirring up countless snowflakes. It was as if an avalanche was crashing down on her head and face. Ning Xiuma's figure flashed again, avoiding the snow that filled the sky. When the big white bear saw Ning Xiuma suddenly jump out, it seemed to stare blankly for a moment. While it was in a daze, the avalanche it created rushed towards it. In an instant, it was buried under the avalanche, leaving only its white furry head exposed. The white bear was speechless. It roared angrily and struggled violently. Its violent movements caused the ground to tremble. This forced it out a little. No, it's coming out soon. She wanted to kill it while it was still trapped in the snow. Ning Xiuma slightly moved her limbs that were slightly stiff after being buried for a few days. Then, with a flash, she charged towards the big white bear like a bolt of white lightning. A cold, glazed sword appeared in his hand, and he stabbed it towards the white bear's forehead. Bang! Sparks flew everywhere. The sword in Ning Xiuma's hand that could cut through gold and jade and could even easily cut a lump of iron into two halves was actually shattered inch by inch. However, there wasn't even a white mark left on the white bear's head. Ning Xiuma was shocked. Back then, she had observed the white bear skin that Yi Feng had hunted. At that time, the white bear's skin only had a hole in between its eyebrows. The other parts of the skin were intact. Therefore, she knew that the weak point of this kind of big white bear was between its eyebrows. That was why she had attacked it. She was now at Earth rank level 5, and the power of this sword was extremely strong. Ning Xiuma thought that she could kill this big monster in one hit, but she didn't expect that it would be ineffective. This killing move didn't succeed, but instead angered the white bear. It roared and slammed its claws towards Ning Xiuma. This claw contained a monstrous hurricane. If Ning Xiuma was hit by it, she would be turned into a picture. Chapter 1028. Luckily, Ning Xiuma's footwork was good. Her body was like a feather as she floated away from the bear's palm. She managed to avoid the bear's fatal attack. She flipped in the air and landed on the ground. When she looked at the bear again, her heart sank. The big white bear's mountain-like body had already pulled itself out of the snow. At this moment, it was glaring fiercely at Ning Xiuma with its basketball-sized red eyes. The white breath coming out of its nostrils caused the snow on the ground to dance wildly. It was so big. How is it a white bear? It was obviously a mountain god. Ning Xiuma stood in front of it like a ping-pong ball in front of a huge snowball. Her entire body was not even as big as one of its paws. Damn it. She was probably the size of a fly in front of it, right? Killing it was like an ant fighting an elephant. This is the Icefield Snow Bear King. It is the second overlord of the Icefield. The one that Yifeng killed could only be considered as a small fry. A voice suddenly sounded in the air not far away. The voice was as elegant as the wind and flowed in the air like an ice spring. Great God! Ning Xiuma turned around and saw Shun Julie floating in the air, his clothes fluttering in the wind. He was indeed invisible just now. He probably saw that she was in danger and showed himself. While Ning Xiuma was in a daze, the white bear's water pillar was already smashing towards Ning Xiuma's head. If it wasn't for her quick reflexes, the water column would have hit her directly. Ning Xiuma managed to dodge in time. The water column hit the ground, and the snow on the ground melted quickly, forming a deep crack in the ice. This water column was so powerful. Even the most powerful high-pressure water gun couldn't do this. I forgot to tell you that it is an Earth rank level 8 beast. That year, 8 elders of the Flying Star sect who were Earth rank level 7 and above tried to kill it together. 5 of them were fatally injured and took 100 years to recover. However, their skills were all crippled. This bear is listed as one of the most dangerous beasts in the entire continent. Shun Julie continued to teach her about the bear. Ning Xiuma's lips twitched. 8 Earth rank level 7 elders couldn't even win against this thing. She, who had just reached Earth rank level 5, would be no match for it. She could only be tortured. Why was she so unlucky? Every time she met a super abnormal opponent. Damn God. Would it kill to give her a small fry of the same level to have some fun? Most importantly, this beast's skin was too tough. She had tried so many ways to stab it, but she couldn't even cut off a few strands of its fur. There was no sense of accomplishment. She was at a disadvantage against this thing. She was unable to deal any damage to it. It seemed that she could only escape. Just as Ning Xiuma thought of running away, Shun Julie's voice sounded again. Don't even think about running away. It's a vengeful beast. Once it's angered, it will fight you to the death. No matter where you run, it will chase after you until it achieves its goal. What a crazy white bear. Ning Xiuma cursed in her heart, but she was still unconvinced. How did the 8 elders of the Flying Star sect escape? They were forced to the top of a cliff by it. The 8 of them jumped into the icy stream at the bottom of the cliff and barely escaped. There are no cliffs or ice streams here. Shinjuli's voice was still calm. While he was talking, Ning Xiuma had been chased by the white bear 8 times. She was bouncing around like a ping-pong ball. Chapter 10:29. If it weren't for Ning Xiuma's strange footwork, which allowed her to escape danger by a hair's breadth, she would have long been bitten into the white bear's stomach and turned into bear dung. Don't talk about other things. Great God, it's so strong. My weak body won't be able to withstand one of its claws. Quickly come down and help me. Ning Xiuma panted as she circled around the white bear king while shouting and ridiculing him. She wished she could fly up and pull the great god down to be her human shield. Damn it, she was being chased by the bear and running around like a wolf, but the great god was floating in the clouds like a fairy. Not even a strand of his hair was messed up. He looked so relaxed that it was as if he was here for a vacation. It made her speechless. She hated it so much that her teeth itched. Shun Julie glanced at her and said calmly, I think you're also very strong. You might not lose to it. Ning Xiuma was speechless. You're the strong one. You're more like a pervert. You can only be strong when you're in a desperate situation. Xiuma, I'll be here cheering for you. Shun Julie waved his sleeves, and a cloud table appeared under his feet. On the cloud table was a chessboard with black and white chess pieces crisscrossing each other. Ning Xiuma was speechless. She didn't even have the energy to complain anymore. If there was a pervert on this continent, it would definitely be Shun Julie. She couldn't rely on the great god now, so she could only rely on herself. However, if she was really in danger, the great god wouldn't just stand by and watch, right? Although Ning Xiuma was still being chased by the white bear, she was still in a difficult situation. However, With a great deity overseeing the situation, she felt a lot more at ease. She was already mentally strong, so she could naturally calm down now. She started to look for the white bear's weakness in the fight. Since the white bear was the overlord of this place, it must be very strong to be able to dominate in such a cruel environment. Moreover, it didn't show any weakness at all. While Ning Xiaoma was running away, she had casually used her condensed concealed weapons to attack it countless times. She had pierced countless places, but she was still unable to injure it. Instead, it had angered it even more, causing it to fly into a rage as it circled around Ning Xiaoma like a tornado. The dense water pillars and ice blades didn't stop like a storm. There were many times when Ning Xiaoma was almost hit by the ice blades. If she was hit, she would become an ice hedgehog. She felt like she was a lone boat in the middle of a stormy sea. She was in danger of being swallowed by the waves at any moment. Rip! Her sleeve was hit by an ice blade and broke into two. That ice blade brushed past her arm. The edge of the ice blade even cut a layer of skin on her arm. Blood seeped out. Ning Xiaoma's arm slightly trembled and her body staggered. She narrowly avoided being hit by the big white bear's jet of water. Fortunately, she hastily retreated 2 steps to avoid it. The jet of water brushed past her hair, and her charming face was scraped by the hurricane created by the jet of water. Ning Xiaoma desperately jumped back a few feet. She couldn't help but look up at the great god who was not far away. She was in danger here, but Shun Juli was sitting on the clouds like a deity overlooking the mortal world. He wasn't moved at all. He really didn't care about her anymore. If she had reacted a little slower, she would have gone to the king of hell for tea. Yet, he was still playing chess as if nothing had happened to him. Was chess that important to him? More important than her life? She had just played chess with him for a day. How would he treat her like this? Chapter 10:30. The Almighty probably wanted her to know that she couldn't leave him. Once she left, it would be difficult for her to move forward. Did he want her to know that she couldn't be angry with him? Or else she would have to pay the price in blood. Although Ning Xiaoma told herself not to think too much and not to care too much about it, there was still resentment in her heart that came from the bottom of her heart. A fight between masters was a matter of life and death, so she couldn't be distracted. Moreover, she was fighting against a bear that was much stronger than her in terms of ability and strength. She was immediately in danger. Carelessly, her calf was cut by the ice blade. Although it wasn't a serious injury, there was still blood flowing out. Although the ice blade shot by the big white bear wasn't poisonous, it was different from normal ice blades. When she was hit by it, it was as painful as being stung by a bee. The intense pain caused Ning Xiaoma's drifting mind to return to reality. Now wasn't the time for her to be calculative. She had to fight for her life. Don't be distracted. Shun Juli's voice sounded in her ear. Ning Xiaoma pursed her lips and ignored him. She didn't look at him and focused all her energy on the big white bear. Just like that, one person and one bear, one running and one chasing, fought for more than an hour. Within a radius of a few miles, all the snow had been flattened by the white bear. It had turned into a slippery, hard ice surface. However, there were countless ravines on the surface of the ice. Naturally, those were the result of the white bear's water jets. Shun Jili was still playing chess. He seemed to be leisurely, but in fact, he was constantly paying attention to all the movements below. If one looked carefully at the chessboard in front of him, one would be able to see that he was playing very carelessly. There were many flaws, and it wasn't his usual style. Sometimes he held the black pieces, sometimes he held the white pieces. His fingertips were holding the pieces so tightly that they were faintly white. However, he was unwilling to put them down. There seemed to be a dark tide surging in his eyes. He had always used thunderous methods to train his disciples. A person's greatest potential would only be stimulated in the most dangerous situations. Therefore, he would often throw his disciples to a place where they would fight to survive. As long as they didn't meet with any real life-threatening danger, he wouldn't intervene. Therefore, the disciples he taught were all very independent, and their kung fu improved very quickly. Even when he saw his own disciple fighting for his life below, his heart was as calm as still water, as unmoving as a mountain. He wouldn't care about it all. But this time, he started to feel uneasy. The bloodstains that appeared on her body after she was injured almost stung his eyes. There were several times when he almost couldn't help but make a move. He even crushed one of the chess pieces. But no, this kind of bear wasn't something that could be encountered all the time. It required a lot of luck. If she could defeat this bear by herself, her skills would be greatly improved, and she would also have unexpected gains. But if he helped her, all her previous efforts would be wasted. Moreover, because he had been too worried about her recently, he couldn't bear to let go of her no matter what he did. This was a taboo in training disciples to grow quickly. She had to grow up quickly. She had to become strong quickly. Only then would he be able to stop worrying about her. When that day came, another hour passed. Such a fierce fight made Ning Shuima's clothes soaked with sweat. Even the tip of her nose was covered with droplets of sweat. During this hour, she didn't look at Shunjuli again. All her attention was focused on the big white bear. The psychokinesis in her body was completely stimulated by her frequent use of it, and it flowed faster and faster. Chapter 1031. At first, Ning Shuima was not very familiar with some of her moves. However, after fighting with the white bear for so long, she finally became more familiar with them. Her fire control skills had also improved greatly during the fight. Now, when she used fireballs to attack, she could shoot out 6 at once. Each fireball was the size of a small round table, and they surrounded the white bear from all directions. Although the white bear's water was the nemesis of fire, it could not withstand the number of fireballs that Ning Shuima shot out. Moreover, the angle of attack was very strange, so the white bear could not guard against it. It slapped with its claws, poured water, whipped its tail, and jumped up to dodge. It used all kinds of tricks, and only then did it manage to dodge the fireballs. At this moment, Ning Shuima's heart skipped a beat. When she used her wooden awl and wooden sword, the white bear did not even try to dodge. However, it seemed to be busy with the fireballs that she shot at it. It was actually afraid of fire. Ning Shuima was very good at finding the opponent's weakness in battle. Once she found the weakness, she would kill it. Therefore, she quickly adjusted her fighting style. She used the fire element to attack and the wood element to defend. This was a truly dangerous fight. Although there was a great disparity in strength, because of Ning Shuima's numerous tricks and rich battle experience, she did not fall into a disadvantageous position. Her fireballs became more and more condensed, and the power of her fireballs became stronger. Finally, one of them hit the white bear's chest. Although it did not cause any substantial damage, it still burned a large part of its fur. The white bear was a male. It relied on its smooth, satin-like fur to attract the opposite sex. It was a very vain creature. Usually, it was very narcissistic about its white fur. When it had nothing to do, it would let the female bear it liked smooth its fur. The female bear would be very careful when smoothing its fur, because once a few strands were smooth, it would fly into a rage and slap the female bear away. This showed how much it cared about its white fur. Now, its incomparably precious white fur was burned by this little woman who was not even a pellet in its eyes. It was bald. Its chest hair was bald. The big white bear was enraged. The hair on its body stood up like sharp needles, and it let out an earth-shattering roar. Its claws danced wildly, and a large iceberg quickly formed above its head. With a wave of its large claws, the large iceberg flew towards Ning Shuima. At this time, it didn't want to catch her and eat her. Instead, it wanted to smash her into a meat patty, slap him into a pulp, in order to take revenge for this grudge. Boom! The iceberg slammed into the ground, causing the ice shards on the ground to dance wildly. That little human who dared to burn its fur must have been slapped to death, right? It was impossible for her to dodge such a huge iceberg. This was his ultimate move. Back then, he had used this move to kill a snow eagle flood dragon that was opposing their bear clan. The entire bear clan took delight in talking about this. Even such a powerful snow eagle flood dragon was unable to dodge its iceberg, so it was even more impossible for that little person to dodge. The big white bear was still confident. Therefore, after the ice shards fell from the sky, it scanned the surroundings with its blood-red eyes. Sure enough, it did not find any trace of the little person. She must have been smashed to death. The big white bear proudly looked up to the sky and roared. It raised its claws and wanted to push the iceberg aside, wanting to pick up some meat paste for its meal. Whoosh! Suddenly, there was the sound of a gust of wind behind its head. Before it could react, a fireball hit the back of its head. Chapter 1032. The power of the fireball was so great that the mountain-like big white bear staggered. It rushed forward a few steps, only to feel a burning sensation on the back of its head, and its mind was in a daze. It subconsciously stretched out its paw to scratch the back of its head. Bald. Bald again. The big white bear's vision darkened, almost fainting from anger. It turned around to look for the culprit, Ning Xiuama, but it only saw a white shadow sweep across its head, and its head was also kicked by the other party. This is simply unbearable. Its honorable head had been stepped on by someone again. The big white bear's half-bald head was so angry that it was about to go crazy. It spread its paws and desperately chased after Ning Xiuama's shadow. It used all its strength, ice blades, icebergs, water columns, all its special skills, fiercely attacking Ning Xiuama, but this time it strangely discovered that the other party had transformed from 1 to 4, then from 4 to 8, and finally from 16. 16 Ning Xiuama simultaneously attacked it, making it impossible to defend. Ning Xiuama used the shadow clone technique. She was now very proficient in using this technique, especially after her psychokinesis was upgraded from the original maximum of 8 to 16. Originally, after her shadow clone was destroyed, she had to fight for a long time before she could use it again. But now she was forced to unleash her greatest potential. Every time the big white bear destroyed one, she would immediately create a second one to replace it, so it was always 16 Ning Xiuama that surrounded and attacked it. The big white bear was in a rage. It couldn't tell which one was real and which one was fake. But it was also smart. After the initial anger and helplessness, it also thought of a way to distinguish the other party's real body. Although Ning Xiuama's shadow clones also made the same attack action, and also released fireballs, but the real lethal fireballs were released by her. The big white bear paid the price of losing another 2 strands of fur. It finally recognized Ning Xiuama's real body and attacked it crazily. Ning Xiuama had no choice but to quickly change positions with her doppelganger. After 3 or 4 rounds, the white bear was once again in a daze. Julie had been watching from a cloud. When he saw Ning Xiuama's tricks, he almost wanted to laugh. This little girl was as cunning as a fox. Her performance in battle always had the ability to impress him. He almost wanted to clap his hands and cheer for her. He rarely appreciated a person, but now Ning Xiuama made him look at her in a new light. He had lived for so many years, but he had never seen such a smart person. Even when he was young, he should have been like her, right? This girl was as smart as him. His taste in choosing people was really good. The people he liked were really super strong. Now Ning Xiuama had started to gain the upper hand. She had already grasped the big white bear's movements and attack patterns, so it wasn't as difficult as before to deal with it. For the first time, the big white bear was so tired from fighting that it was covered in sweat. The sweat almost soaked its fur, as if it had been washed with water. Ning Xiuama naturally didn't have it easy either. She was also covered in sweat, and she was so tired that she wanted to die. She couldn't wait to lie down on the snow and roll around a few times to rest. But she couldn't. She didn't have the right to rest before she defeated this fellow. Although she had burned off a few parts of the big white bear's fur, making it look like a spotted pig with mangy skin disease, she hadn't really caused any fatal damage to it. Chapter 1033. Ning Xiuama's hidden weapons had almost tested every part of its body. There was no weak point. She still could not find its weak point. During the fierce battle, She was constantly sizing it up, trying to analyze where its weak point was. Its weak point should be on its hind feet. Shunjuli suddenly said from afar, Ning Xuan. Indeed, the big white bear had been fighting with her while standing upright, and her hidden weapons did not even miss its anus. These were not its weak points. Then if it really has a weak point, then it's most likely the two soles of its back feet that were constantly stepping on the ice. Ning Shuma swept her hand across its thick pillar-like hind feet, the corners of her lips twitching. How could she make this bear lift its hind feet and let her stab it with her sword? She also couldn't drill under its feet. One person and one bear fought for a while. Ning Xiuma carefully observed for a moment and found that the big white bear was unusually cautious of its hind feet. It would not lift them easily, especially its left foot, which was the most important part of its protection. If the wooden thorns that Ning Xiuma shot at it hit other parts of its body, it would ignore them, but when it was near its left foot, it would use its claws to brush it away. Its weak point should be on its left foot. Ning Xiuma's eyes flickered slightly. Then she suddenly changed her attack method. She no longer used the fire attack that could burn off the big white bear's fur, but instead used the useless wooden thorns to attack. The wooden thorns that she shot out were nearly a foot long, incomparably sharp, but the accuracy was not very good. Most of them did not hit the big white bear's body, but directly hit the ice behind the big white bear. Is this little thing out of strength? It's so inaccurate. Even if it stood there and let her shoot, she could only hit it a few times. This little thing's body is small. Its strength is naturally small. It should be exhausted soon. The big white bear became complacent again. It roused its spirit and attacked Ning Xiuma even more fiercely. Ning Xiuma was probably really exhausted. In the fierce battle, her body suddenly staggered and fell forward. The ice beneath her was slippery, and she could not stop her momentum. Her entire body slid onto the left hind leg of the big white bear. The big white bear was stunned. Naturally, it did not want to let go of this rare opportunity to flatten this little person. He immediately lifted his left foot and stomped down on Ning Xiuma's body. Its hind legs were as thick as pillars, and one of its feet was as big as a round table. If Ning Xiuma was stepped on by it, she would be trampled into a pile of meat. In the clouds, Shun Juli's expression changed. He stood up abruptly and was about to make a move to save them when his eyes suddenly widened. Whitey, who had already lifted its left leg, suddenly remembered something. Before its foot could touch Ning Xiuma, it suddenly landed on the ground. Its action was a little too hasty, and the huge inertia caused its body to shake violently, and it took another 2 or 3 steps back. Pooh! Ow wow! A loud sound like a tire had burst sounded. The big white bear's left foot had coincidentally stepped on a sharp wooden thorn. It let out a long and miserable howl, and its huge body fell backwards, and Ning Xiuma had already rolled forward cleverly to avoid the falling body, and rolled to the other side that she had already calculated beforehand. The sound of the big white bear falling to the ground was earth-shattering, and the surrounding snow shook a few times as if there was an earthquake. Countless snowflakes were stirred up and fell onto the big white bear on the ground. Chapter 1034. The big white bear could no longer get up. It curled up and trembled on the ground. There was a huge wooden spike embedded in its paw, and blood flowed down the side of the spike like a small stream. Its weak spot was indeed under its left paw. In just a short moment, the big white bear was already on the verge of death. It stared unwillingly at Ning Xiuma, who was slowly approaching it. It couldn't believe that it would lose to such a small person. Ning Xiuma approached it with a tense expression. Then, she raised her hand and pulled out the wooden spike from its paw. Fresh blood spurted out like a fountain. The big white bear let out a long howl and finally breathed its last. Ning Xiuma's move seemed like a dangerous move, but in reality, it was all part of her meticulous calculations. Every single wooden spike she shot out that seemed to have missed its target had been precisely calculated by her. There was a formation in place. The big white bear moved as if it was flying. When its battle prowess was high, it didn't use much strength when it landed. It could even step on snow without leaving a trace. Under normal circumstances, even if the big white bear stepped on one of the wooden spikes Ning Xiumo placed there, it would just brush past it and wouldn't be injured. However, when Ning Xiumo fell on its hind paw, it gave the big white bear fright. It mistakenly thought that Ning Xiumo was going to attack its weak spot, so it subconsciously stepped on it. When it remembered that its weak spot was also there, it would subconsciously retract its paw. Under such circumstances, it would definitely stumble back. It didn't have time to use the light body technique, so it fell into the trap she had set up beforehand. She had used all of these methods one after another, and everything was within her calculations. And so she won. She won against this big fellow that was 3 stages higher than her. Even 7 or 8 experts couldn't do anything to it. There's an inner core crystal on its body. Dig it out and use it. Shenjuli's voice rang out from behind Ning Xiumo. He even praised her. Well done. Ning Xiumo didn't turn around. She had read many books about exotic beasts, so she naturally knew where the inner core of this kind of bear was located. After the bear's Achilles heel was pierced, the originally pliable and tough skin that could not be pierced by any sword became much easier to cut. Ning Xiumo quickly found a large section of dark blue crystal on its body. This was the first time she had seen such a pure crystal pillar. It was as if there were water ripples flowing on top of it. It was exceptionally beautiful. Retrieving the crystal pillar was not easy, and she was extremely tired. So after retrieving it, she hugged the crystal pillar and sat on the ground, not wanting to move at all. Absorb the psyche power on this crystal pillar with the art of rejuvenation. Shenjuli's voice sounded again. Ning Xiumo simply lay down on the snow, closed her eyes, and said nothing. She was so tired that she didn't even have the strength to speak. What's wrong? Are you angry? Shenjuli squatted down beside her. Ning Xiumo still didn't open her mouth, and she didn't have any intention of opening her eyes. This bear is a spiritual creature born from heaven and earth. It is already cultivated for thousands of years. It is the only beast with the strongest water spiritual root in the world. The Psyche water crystal pillar in its body is different from others. It has a directional attribute. In a fight, it will take the initiative to face the strongest attacker. If it is killed, this crystal pillar can only be used by the strongest opponent. If I make a move, you will have no fate with this high-quality water spiritual root. So unless it was absolutely necessary, he couldn't make a move. Otherwise, Ning Xiumo wouldn't be able to obtain this water psyche crystal. Chapter 1035. After you get this item, the sooner you absorb it, the purer it will be and the more effective it will be. After 10 hours, half of the effect will disappear. Water is wood. It will be very beneficial for your wood psychokinesis. Shenjuli explained to her and pulled her up. Be good. Absorb it while it is still fresh. It turned out that he had been watching from the side without making a move for her own good. He wanted her to get this crystal. Half of the gloominess in Ning Xiumo's heart dissipated. However, understanding was one thing, and feeling was another. Thinking about how the Almighty was playing chess leisurely by the side when she was fighting for her life, she felt angry. He seemed to be more anxious about the progress of her practice than she was, as if he wanted to make her a peerless master. He was obviously pursuing her, but he was evasive about the marriage. It was as if he was avoiding something. What was he planning to do? Ning Xiumo boasted that she understood human nature the best and could read people's minds the best. But she really could not see through him. She was angry, but she would not make things difficult for herself. She did not want to waste a single bit of the psychokinesis in the crystal pillar. She was about to absorb the water psychokinesis in the crystal pillar according to the method he told her. Suddenly, Kirin's voice sounded in her mind. Master, master, where are you? Its voice sounded a little out of breath, as if it was breathing unsteadily. Ning Xiumo's heart sank a little. Could it be that they were in danger? Little Apple, what happened? Why are you panting? Master, we have encountered a monster. It was covered in white scales, and its body was like a dragon, but it had two curved and sharp horns. It had a big mouth and fangs that were half a foot long. There was also an ice ball on its tail. What kind of monster is this? Ning Xiaomo drew a sketch of the monster in her mind. Then she realized that it was a monster that she had never heard of before. But this was not what she cared about. She only cared about the safety of those people. How is it? Is that monster powerful? You guys are not its match. It's so powerful. We are no match for it. Its body is twice as big as mine, and its strength is also greater. Even if Yifeng and I work together, we're still no match for it. Ning Xiaomo stood up. Tell me where you are. I'll go rescue you. No, there's no need. Although I can't beat it, it can't run as fast as me. If it really doesn't work, I can fly. Now we should get rid of it. Ning Xiaomo was relieved to hear that they were out of danger. Did you meet that monster by chance? How many are there? Oh my God. One of them almost broke his leg from running. If a few of them come, I'm afraid I'll die. So there was only one. Ning Xiaomo was even more relieved. Where did that monster come from? How did you provoke it? Ning Xiaomo wanted to understand the habits of this monster. But her question immediately ignited Kiran's negative emotions. It seemed that it had been holding back for a long time, and now it immediately complained to Ning Xiaomo. It's all that idiot Guzian's fault. He found a large egg at the bottom of an ice slope. Yifeng said that the egg looked ominous and couldn't be eaten. But Guzian laughed at Yifeng because he didn't even dare to eat an egg. He broke the egg on the spot, saying that the egg was nutritious and could replenish one's strength if eaten raw. In the end, when the egg was broken, it attracted the mother of the egg. It was that big monster. It flew into a rage and chased after us to bite us. If I hadn't run fast enough, we would have been finished this time. Chapter 1036. In such a snowfield, a young master like Guzian, who had not experienced any great storms, was just a burden. He could not accomplish anything, but he was good at spoiling things. It made people speechless. Kiran seemed to still be in the process of escaping, so after it said a few more words, it hurriedly ended the call with Ning Xiaomo. In fact, Kiran was indeed still running for its life. It was like a bolt of blue lightning flying across the vast white snowfield. The sled behind them was almost flying. It had barely touched the ground, and the wind mixed with the snow made their cheeks hurt. A huge monster that looked like a dinosaur and was covered in white scales was chasing after them. The monster's speed was so fast that it was almost on par with the little Qilin. When Guzian turned around, he saw the monster staring at him with its lantern-sized eyes. It was glowing with an ominous glint. Its huge mouth opened and roared from time to time. Guzian could almost see its huge sharp teeth with a few strands of flesh hanging from them. He was so scared that his legs were trembling. His face was pale, and his hands were trembling so much that he almost lost his grip on the sled. The monster opened its mouth, and a strong, fishy wind blew toward them. Ah! Yan Ziyuan cried out in alarm. She lost her grip on the sled, and her hands loosened. Her whole body flew out like a kite with a broken string. Behind her, the white monster was waiting with its huge mouth open. Guzian shouted, "Ziyuan," but he only held on tightly to the sled and turned his head away. He could not bear to see Yan Ziyuan being torn apart. Yifeng also flew out the moment Yan Ziyuan was thrown out. He raised his speed to the maximum and finally caught Yan Ziyuan before she fell into the monster's mouth. But he was too fast, and he could not stop in time. He could only watch as he flew into the monster's mouth. When the monster saw that there was one more person, it was naturally very happy. It quickly opened its mouth wider, waiting for a big meal to be delivered. Yan Ziyuan could almost see the monster's house-sized mouth. A huge blood-red tongue, with flesh spikes curled up, and stinky saliva dripped down the monster's mouth drop by drop. She was so scared that her face turned pale, and her heart felt like it was going to jump out of her chest. Her vision suddenly turned black as a large hand covered her eyes. Yifeng's slightly cold voice sounded in her ears. "Don't be afraid. I'm here." These simple words gave Yan Ziyuan great comfort. It was as if a warm current was washing over her heart, making her have an inexplicable urge to cry. She was tightly held in Yi Feng's arms, but his strength was so gentle that it was as if he was protecting a precious and fragile porcelain. She did not feel any pain at all. Yin Ziyuan was pressed against his chest. Her eyes were covered by his hand. Hearing his fast and powerful heartbeat, she suddenly felt at ease. It was as if there was a mountain of knives and a sea of fire in front of them, as long as she was with him, they could go through it together. Yifeng calmly looked at the enlarged mouth in front of him. At the moment when he was about to fly in, he kicked the monster's sharp teeth. The strength of his kick was so great that it broke the monster's teeth. Using this reaction force, his body shot up, and after a few quick jumps on the snowy ground, he flew towards the sled. All of this happened in a flash. The monster thought that a big meal was about to be in its mouth, but it did not expect that the fat meat in its mouth would fly away and one of its front teeth would be broken. It was furious and roared again and again. Chapter 10:37. The roar was so loud that Gu Ziyan almost fainted. His face was drained of color as he gripped the sled tightly. He urged Kiran, who had deliberately slowed down to wait for Yifeng, to speed up. If it wasn't for the fact that Gu Ziyan's blood was the antidote to the curse, Kiran would have thrown Gu Ziyan out to feed the monster. How could there be such a scum in this world? Yifeng finally rushed back with Yin Ziyuan in his arms. Because of this delay, the white monster was very close to them. Kiran waited for Yifeng to regain his footing before picking up speed. Finally, they managed to put some distance between them and the monster. The wind on the icy plains was strong to begin with, and with Kiran's lightning-fast speed, the wind was so strong that it could almost flip a person over. The real wind was like a knife cutting through the air. At this time, it was snowing. The usually soft and light snowflakes were like small cannonballs under the relatively high speed, smashing down on Yifeng and the others. Yifeng gripped the sled tightly with one hand and raised his sleeve to protect Yin Ziyuan. At the same time, he used Sharkman's power of origin to keep her warm. Yin Ziyuan had an indescribable feeling in her heart. She wanted to push him away, but she also wanted to hug him tightly. This feeling was sweet and sour at the same time. It made her slightly absent-minded. The person in front of her who was hugging her was very warm. At the same time, he was also protecting her tightly, as if he was afraid that she would be hurt. On the other hand, Gu Ziyan was very unlucky. The wind blew so hard that he couldn't open his eyes. His fingers were frozen, and his hair was blown wildly by the wind. He had lost his gentle and elegant image of a noble young master. Now, he was clutching the sled tightly like a madman. He screamed in horror, "Slow down. Slow down. I'm going to be thrown off. Ziyuan, tell Kiran to slow down. Slow down." Kiran was furious. It said fiercely, "Shut up. If you dare to say another word, I'll chop you up and feed you to the dogs." Gu Ziyan immediately kept quiet out of fear, not daring to say another word. He could only continue to hold onto the sled tightly. Like a frightened quail, he curled himself up into a ball and looked at the monster that was getting closer and closer to him with fear and trepidation. He no longer cared that Yifeng was holding Yin Ziyuan. "Kacha, kacha!" The sled beneath him suddenly made a strange noise. Yifeng's expression changed slightly as he frowned. This was bad. The sled was about to fall apart. Coincidentally, one of the logs under Gu Ziyan broke. His body tilted and he was almost thrown off. In his panic, he couldn't help but shout, the sled is breaking." Naturally, Yin Ziyuan also knew that the sleigh was about to break. Her face turned pale, and she couldn't help but tighten her grip on Yifeng's hand. Yifeng hugged her tightly with one arm and comforted her softly. "Don't be afraid." Yifeng's voice seemed to have a strange, soothing effect. It made her panicked mind slowly calm down. The little Qilin tried to slow down in order to slow down the speed of the snow sleigh's destruction, but the white beast was relentless in its pursuit. As soon as it slowed down, the white beast fiercely opened its mouth and fiercely closed it again. The sound of its white teeth biting down was extremely loud. Gu Ziyan was so scared that his soul almost flew away. He kept urging, faster, faster. Oh no, you can't go too fast. It'll fall apart. What should we do? Yifeng, don't you have any ideas? It's a pity that I've lost all my power. Otherwise, I would definitely be able to stop it. The wind was too strong, and his voice was broken in the air. Chapter 1038. Yin Ziyuan was barely able to hear what he said. However, she was also concerned about him. Hearing the change in pitch of his voice, she could not help but ask Yifeng, Yifeng, what did he say? Yifeng looked back at the monster that was about to catch up to them. Then, he looked at Yin Ziyuan, who was in his arms. Steeling himself, he pulled her hand and placed it on the sled. You can do it. Hold on tight. Yin Ziyuan subconsciously tightened her grip on the wooden handle. Suddenly, she felt a chill run down her back. Yifeng's body was sent flying backward. His cold voice could still be heard clearly in the wind. Kiran, you take the two of them and leave first. I will bring up the rear. Bring up your sister's bloodline. He was simply no match for the monster. Bringing up the rear would only make him a snack for the monster. Was he planning to use his own flesh and blood to help the two of them? That stupid fish. Kiran opened its mouth and turned around to grab Yifeng's robes. Then it tossed him onto its back. The wind was too strong and Kiran could only shout. Master said, we must go through thick and thin together. If we're going to leave, we will leave together. After that, it used the same method to toss Yin Ziyuan onto its back. Just as it was about to reluctantly hold Gu Ziyan in its mouth, Gu Ziyan saw the huge mouth right before his eyes. Fear welled up in his heart, and he could not stop himself from taking a step back. He avoided Kiran's mouth. Kiran, holy shit! At the same time, the fragile sled was no longer able to withstand Kiran's lightning-fast speed. With a crash, it broke into pieces. Gu Ziyan rolled and was thrown out. The inertia was too great, and he rolled like an unstoppable ball. When he finally managed to stop rolling and open his eyes, he was so frightened that he nearly fell to the ground. Behind him, the white monster was less than 10 steps away from him. Seeing that he was alone, the white monster's eyes filled with excitement and ferocity. It opened its mouth and charged toward him. Ah, help! I was left behind. Kiran, I was left behind. Ziyuan. Gu Ziyan let out a shrill cry. His voice had completely changed. It was almost inhuman. Kiran cursed under his breath and had no choice but to turn around and run back. Gu Ziyan was about the same distance away from the two beasts. When Kiran arrived, the white behemoth had also arrived. Its big mouth was facing Gu Ziyan, and its saliva was almost dripping onto his head. Gu Ziyan seemed to have fainted from the shock and was paralyzed on the spot. The white behemoth was stunned when it saw the little Qilin that had run away come back like a bolt of lightning. While it was in a daze, the little Qilin had already gathered all its strength. Its big head fiercely slammed into the relatively soft part of the behemoth's body, causing the behemoth that was twice its size to stumble back a few steps. Kiran's head was also dizzy from the impact. It shook its big head and took the opportunity to pick up the unconscious Gu Ziyan with its mouth and threw him on its back. At the same time, it muttered, "Why is there a foul smell?" Then it sped up and ran a few steps. A pair of fleshy wings spread out on its body, and it flew up like a small glider. It was actually very sad. If it was not so urgent, Kiran would not let anyone else ride on its back except for its master and the Divine Lord. Now that the situation was urgent, it had no choice but to carry them on its back and fly for a while. The white behemoth obviously could not fly, but it was unwilling to give up and chased after them for a long distance. When it saw that it could not catch up, it resentfully stopped. Chapter 1039. The monster roared a few times at the sky where Kiran had disappeared. Its long and sorrowful cries resounded through the sky. Kiran carried Yifeng and the others into the air. Gu Ziyan finally woke up. When he woke up and saw himself flying in the air, he was so scared that he trembled. When he was unconscious, Yifeng had been holding him tightly. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to sit on Kieran's back. When Yifeng saw that he had woken up, he also let out a sigh of relief and said lightly, "Hold on tight." In order for them to have something to hold on to, the little Qilin deliberately changed the Qilin armor on its back into a few handles. Yifeng moved aside and let Gu Ziyan hold on to one of the handles. Gu Ziyan also knew that this was a moment of life and death, so he quickly held on tightly. He had been frightened too much today, and his mind was on the verge of collapse. When Gu Ziyan's frightened soul returned to its original position, he suddenly felt that a certain part of his lower body was a little cold and painful. He was shocked. Could it be that the monster ate his family jewels? He quickly touched his lower body and made sure that it was still there. Only then did he let out a long sigh of relief. Yifeng coldly watched him touch himself. He buried Yan Ziyuan's face in his arms, not letting her see this unsightly scene. Gu Ziyan's touch was completely subconscious. When he realized how embarrassing it was to do it, he had already finished touching himself. Even if Gu Ziyan's skin was as thick as a city wall, his handsome face couldn't help but turn red at this moment. He was embarrassed in front of his love rival. Not only did he touch himself, he was also so scared that he wet his pants. If those two people knew about this, then Gu Ziyan, would really find a hole to hide in. However, Kieran's back was wide enough, and he was sitting behind Yifeng and the others. They shouldn't be able to smell it, right? Gu Ziyan could only clamp his legs together and pretend that nothing had happened. He adjusted his wolf fur robe to make himself look more natural. He wanted to change the topic to end this awkward situation. He cleared his throat and said, then, before he could finish a sentence, Kieran interrupted, "Gu Ziyan, why is your but so wet? Damn it, did you pee your pants just now?" Gu Ziyan was speechless. His face turned even redder as he tried to defend himself. "No, of course not. It's snow water. Just now, there must have been snow stuck to my body, so... Fuck, who are you trying to fool? Snow water smelled like urine? Don't try to fool me." Kieran bluntly exposed him. Gu Ziyan. He couldn't find the words to refute her. On the other side, Kieran bluntly scolded him. "A grown man like you actually peed your pants? Don't you feel ashamed? Don't you dare pee on me again. If you dare to pee on me, I will immediately throw you down and trample you to death." Gu Ziyan. His face had already turned the color of pig liver. Yan Ziyuan couldn't help but turn around and look at Gu Ziyan with a complicated expression. Ziyan. Kieran was still complaining, but Gu Ziyan couldn't hear her at all. His mind was filled with the words embarrassing. Not only did his beloved find out about this embarrassing incident, but his love rival also saw it as a joke. He originally wanted to call Yan Ziyuan over so that she wouldn't be with Yifeng. Now that Kieran had exposed the fact that he had peed his pants, he wanted to find a hole to hide in. He was too ashamed to call Yan Ziyuan over. Chapter 1040. Yifeng did not look back at all. It had nothing to do with him whether that person peed in his pants or not. The wind was biting cold. No matter who it was, opening their mouth would result in a stomach full of wind. The little Qilin was flying too fast, so Yinzin didn't dare to move carelessly on its back. She wanted to ask about Gu Ziyan's situation, but after being hit by the wind several times, she finally gave up. Kieran did not fly for a long time in the air. Yan Ziyuan and Gu Ziyan's psychokinesis was either weak or non-existent, so they could not withstand the strong wind in the air. The two of them could not withstand a long flight, so Kieran flew for less than half an hour before Gu Ziyan painfully shouted for it to stop. Kieran laughed at him for a while, then slowly descended when it saw that the white monster was no longer there. During this time, Yan Ziyuan had been very quiet, staying beside Yifeng. No one knew what she was thinking. Yifeng had been protecting her, slowing down the wind for her. He lowered his eyes and looked at Yan Ziyuan, who was sitting quietly beside him with her head lowered. Suddenly, he felt a little warm in his heart. She was now willing to sit beside him and let him shelter her from the wind and rain. This was like a dream. The pain in his heart for the past few days was like the ice and snow of early spring, slowly melting away. His empty and frozen heart was filled at this moment. It was warmed and gradually became alive. Again and again, it beat vigorously. Although the conditions were bad, and they were still running for their lives, Yi Feng felt satisfied. He hoped that time would stop at this moment, and she would be by his side safely, relying on him wholeheartedly. Under his wings, she would be happy and worry-free for the rest of her life. If this is a dream, please let me wake up later. The little Qilin slowly landed in an open space. It shook the scales on its body and felt that it was scum after flying with Gu Ziyan on this journey. If it weren't for the fact that they couldn't leave it, it would have dived into the sea to wash itself. It was a Kirin that loved cleanliness. After Yi Feng landed safely with Yan Ziyuan in his arms, he subconsciously hugged her to protect her. Gu Ziyan rolled and crawled down from the little Qilin's back. He staggered and stood firm on the ground. After seeing Yi Feng's action towards Yan Ziyuan, the fire in his heart flared up. In a flash, he felt as if his hat had been cuckolded by a lot. He resisted the urge to get angry and squeezed out a gentle and handsome smile. Ziyuan, come here. Why do you always stay with other men? Yan Ziyuan was stunned and hesitated for a moment. She looked at him and then looked at Yi Feng. Her clear eyes flashed with some confusion, and her feet moved slightly towards him. Gu Ziyan's heart skipped a beat. He had a feeling that Yan Ziyuan was going to be out of his control again. He immediately cast a spell secretly and strengthened the control of the double life spell. He looked at Yan Ziyuan with tenderness that almost turned into tears. Ziyuan, come here. Let me see if you're hurt. Come on my side. Yan Ziyuan's eyes flashed with pain and confusion. In the end, she finally fell in love with Gu Ziyan. She broke free from Yi Feng's hand and walked towards Gu Ziyan. She said with concern, Ziyan, how are you? But she couldn't help but look at Yi Feng. Gu Ziyan took the opportunity to hold Yan Ziyuan's hand and looked at her affectionately. Ziyuan, as long as you're okay, I'm alive for you. At the same time, he strengthened the power of the double life spell again. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.